Chapter 875. Compared to the nervous staff, the culprits who created this tense situation had no awareness at all. Gu Fei and Han family young master had already logged off one after the other. The rest of the people did what they had to do and were still living comfortably. Seeing how the main city had become so lively because of their piece of news, they all felt that it was quite interesting. The only annoying thing was that everyone was being harassed to varying degrees by their friends. For example, sort of no oath, of course, it was inevitable that he would come over and try to get something out of it. But from Sword Demon's serious attitude, he really couldn't get anything out of it. As for the others, even core members like Yutian Shenming and Unscathed in Battle, even if they wanted to say something, how could they know what Han family young master was planning to do tomorrow? At that moment, Brother Yu finally understood that going offline tonight was definitely a very smart decision. As the core member with the weakest deterrent force and the one known for gossiping, he received the most harassment. Brother Yu couldn't take it anymore, and in the end, he also decisively chose to log off. Very overpowered players gradually embarked on this path, which made the staff who paid special attention to them very frustrated. Many of them were even dragged out of their beds to work overtime. But this group of shameless culprits actually logged off early tonight to rest. Apart from this group of shameless people, this night was really long for too many people. The second day. To be honest, it was really hard to define the second day. In the announcement that Brother Yu made, the time used was tomorrow. Many players treated the second day as coming after midnight, afraid that they would be very overpowered and rush to throw things early in the morning. At this time, many players hadn't completed their migration work, and the very overpowered players hadn't completely logged off. In the two cities of Cloud and Moonlight, there were already players walking around the streets paying attention to environmental protection. Once they saw someone throw something, they would excitedly pounce on it. Then, when they found out that it was really a pile of trash, there was no need to mention how disappointing it was. Speaking of the forum notice, the players were quite depressed. The time was vague and the location was not accurate either. Cloud and Moonlight, two cities, was it Cloud or Moonlight? Countless players were struggling to make a decision that night. Some people thought that since Cloud Sky was the home of these people, Cloud Sky would be the first to start. Others thought that Cloud Sky would do the exact opposite and throw Moonlit Night before returning home. Either way, after Moonlit Night City servers were restored, Cloud Sky and Moonlit Night City began to interact with each other. That night, the meandering Dark Dragon Mountain range was as lively as any main city's busiest street. Some players who liked to seize any opportunity to do business even went to the edge of a cliff. Cloud City didn't disappoint either. After Moonlit City, it was also disconnected due to the network delay, but it was restored after half an hour. Everything was normal. When the sun was about to rise, the mail system was finally restored due to the persistent complaints and curses of the players. However, in the announcement, the officials solemnly pointed out that the crisis was not over. Due to the repeated requests of the players, the mail system was temporarily restored. However, the investigation of the loopholes was not over yet. With the circulation of mail, the difficulty and efficiency of the investigation would decrease, and there might be a delay in the delivery of mail. This message was very subtle. After Moonlit Night City and Cloud Sky were overcrowded, the smart players had already guessed the true intention of the officials to suspend the mail system. At this time, when this message came out, many people were already aware that if they sent teleportation scrolls, they would be delayed. However, when they continued to try, they realized that they couldn't get their hands on teleportation scrolls anymore. Players didn't have many teleportation scrolls in their hands. Studios would deliberately hoard these things, and during special times, these things would have special value. For example, tonight, when the teleportation scrolls were hyped up, many studios had already raised their swords high, ready to cut down the players' heads and faces. However, they didn't expect that the game company would actually make a move on them. Powerful studios were all well known in the game company. Tonight, they were all contacted by the game company, and the content was the same. They hoped that they would cooperate and control the trade of teleportation scrolls tonight. The reason was also the truth. The game company said it politely, and the studios also fully understood their intentions. the so-called control of the trade, of course, was best to directly suspend the trade. Although the development of the studio's industry was booming, it wasn't yet the time to twist the thigh of the game company. Moreover, the game company obviously regarded their players as God, and at this time, they unscrupulously chose to sacrifice the interests of their studios. The bosses of the studios could only swallow their anger and arrange for the trade of teleportation scrolls to be suspended. Since it was the intention of the game company, it was possible that these guys had already monitored every teleportation scroll. In this world, when it was said that heaven knows, earth knows, and I know, one must understand that there really was heaven and earth. The game system was this heaven and earth, and as long as it was willing, it could know everything. No studios dared to take the risk. They all kept their teleportation scrolls well, so after the mail system was restored, it became a common phenomenon that they couldn't find teleportation scrolls. In fact, according to the data some staff had, after the parallel operation of 11 servers in Cloud City and Moonlit Night City, even if all the teleportation scrolls in the game were fully loaded and sent to these two cities, the servers of the two cities would still be able to withstand it. Even so, the final decision was to limit the number of teleportation scrolls. The reason was that the staff in charge of the calculation later discovered that although there was no problem with the servers, there was a big problem with the size of the main cities. If all the above teleportation was completed, with a considerable number of players migrating on foot, and with everyone gathering in the main cities of Cloud City and Moonlit Night City would not be able to accommodate such a large number of people. It was simply an enlarged version of the previous dungeon problem, although this time it wouldn't cause any data collapse. If that's the case, isn't it unnecessary to have 11 servers in parallel in a main city? Someone questioned. Just in case, there's more servers to ensure the quality. Someone said. But, no buts, it's the boss's intention to use all 10 servers. Therefore, the person who said, but, immediately shut up. What's the situation in the two cities now? The big boss of the parallel world sat in his office, looking at the white sky outside the window and asking his subordinates. He didn't rest much that night, and could be considered a very dedicated boss. This matter wasn't too big of a deal, and it didn't really require him, the highest decision-maker, to personally command the situation. The situation of the network in the two cities is stable, and the emotions of the players are also relatively stable, the subordinate reported. What about the very overpowered people? The guild that could be remembered by the big boss of the game company was very overpowered, and it was already making history. They are all offline. At this time, the subordinate held back his tears. He was one of the people who was very dissatisfied with the overpowered people who created big trouble and then lived happily in the world. These troublesome people? The big boss sighed. Delete them? The subordinate couldn't help but say. Of course, the big boss knew that he was just being impulsive and joking, so he just laughed it off. He turned back and looked outside the window. It's morning. It's probably time for those guys to come online. The subordinate's tone was that of a bear coming out of its cave. Another lively day. The big boss sighed. Did the overpowered people come online? The answer was no. Although they went offline earlier than usual, it was still after midnight. How could they come online at dawn? However, many of the players who stayed up all night couldn't take it anymore, and the studios that stayed up all night were also very tired. The players went offline, afraid that all their hard work would go to waste. The workers had already solved the problem and could rest, but they couldn't bear to miss the scene. Everyone was thinking, bastard, when are we going to come online? The overpowered people didn't come online, but the core members of the overpowered people were discussing how to start throwing equipment today. Communication was everywhere, and it didn't have to be in the game. The direction of the forum has completely changed. No one mentioned anything about us and In Chi's studio for the entire night. They were all talking about us throwing equipment. Brother Yu was very happy. Only now did he realize how sharp the Han family young master's move was. The one who was more depressed about this was Mudo Mudo. They wanted to slowly release this more eye-catching topic, but in the end, it was exposed by the overpowered people. What are we going to do today? Brother Yu asked. Throw equipment in both cities at once. Old Yun, You can bring some people over to Moonlit Night City. You guys are more familiar with it. Han family young master said. No problem. Yun Zhongmu nodded. Leave Cloud City to us. We'll do it at the same time. We'll throw equipment once an hour. There's no need to make an announcement. We'll let the players discover the pattern. 25 people from each city will throw one item at a time. I did a rough calculation. It'll start at noon, and it'll be lively until the peak at night. When it's the peak, we'll throw out everything we have. Han family young master said. Why don't we throw it all at once? Someone asked. If we throw it too quickly, some people will feel like we didn't throw it at all. If we continue for a bit longer, then people will know that this has been going on for a long time. When we're done, we'll make an announcement on the forums. Han family young master said. Cheese people will probably cause trouble, right? Brother Yu was worried. Cause trouble? How can he cause trouble? But remember, the people in charge of throwing equipment shouldn't wear their guild badges. It's best if they cover their faces. We can't rule out the possibility that some people will kill us and steal our equipment. Han family young master said. I'm just worried that Chi will send people to do the same. Brother Yu said. Even I don't know where to throw the equipment. Do you think Chi's people will know? Han family young master said. What if? Why don't you worry about people killing us and stealing our equipment? How about it, do you still have the guts to throw it? Han family young master asked. Fuck, of course I do. It was necessary to be stubborn, but after saying this, Brother Yu still felt a bit guilty. In the end, there was still Yu Tianxinming's unreliable consolation. Don't worry, Brother Yu. Even if you die, the equipment might not drop. Even if it does, you've achieved your goal of throwing equipment. Brother Yu cried for a long time before he came back to his senses and said, I think the official announcement on the mail system seems to be a restriction on us. Han family young master easily saw through this problem. If the mail is controlled, then the players in faraway city won't be able to get teleportation scrolls. Therefore, the number of people will be effectively controlled. That's good. If there are so many people that we can't even move, then what's the point of doing anything? Unscathed in battle said. Then, everyone discussed some small details. Then, they shamelessly went back to sleep and waited for the afternoon to officially start work. The people who had stayed up all night had to suffer through another morning. Persevere, they kept telling themselves. It was already noon, wasn't this considered tomorrow? Extremely overpowered people can't be too shameless. Extremely overpowered people finally heard the cries of the crowd. Compared to most of the players in the game who didn't know anything, the game companies suddenly became alert. This was because the news instantly spread. Extremely overpowered people are online together. What are they going to do? Everyone was already crowded in the monitoring room, but the monitoring room wasn't that big. In order to deal with this situation, they had to ask their boss for permission to do a live broadcast of the monitoring. This monitoring could be seen by any computer that was connected to the company's intranet. Even the company's higher-ups were sitting in the conference room and looking at the huge LCD screen. In the game, the first to know were obviously the players who had online friends. They all chose to stay silent. At this time, the two main cities in Cloud Moon and Night Cloud couldn't be any more crowded. Everyone knew the reason why there were so many people, so everyone around them looked like competitors. After a night of purging, the players in the two main cities had basically eliminated the bad habit of littering. Wasn't littering confusing the public at such a sensitive time? Moreover, it was the public opinion of the entire city. There was no room for discussion. Extremely overpowered players who came online at the various revival points sneakily removed their badges, masked their faces, and blended into the crowd. Then, they moved towards the guild stronghold. This stronghold had never been exposed, otherwise, it would have been guarded by all the players. Everyone arrived one by one, smoothly arriving one by one and entering the house to collect the goods. After that, it was completely up to their own will as to where to throw the equipment. What if someone took something and couldn't bear to throw it away? Han family young master had already thought about this. The distribution of resources was very particular. For people like Sword Demon, he could do as he pleased. For people like Yu Shenming and Scathed in Battle, who were extremely suspicious, they didn't even have the right to get equipment to throw. They could only throw scrolls, which were definitely not of their own class. Moreover, the two of them might even form a gang to commit crimes. As a result, Yu Shenming couldn't even get warrior items from Unscathed in Battle. Similarly, Unscathed in Battle couldn't get archer items either. And no one else knew what each person took. If they tried to find out, they would become the target of suspicion. In this regard, Drifting's treatment was the same as Yu Shenming and Scathed in Battle. Yu Shenming's promotion couldn't be ignored for him to receive this kind of treatment. When this guy realized that something was wrong, he immediately shouted. Moreover, he never hid his disdain and suspicion for Drifting in his heart. Under everyone's gaze, Drifting had to show that he didn't care. Therefore, Han family young master smiled and indifferently gave him the same treatment. Brother Yu and the others muttered to themselves. They thought that Han family young master might have already expected this. He guessed that Yu Shenming would definitely cause trouble for Drifting, so he took the opportunity to suppress Drifting as well. Everyone received their items and immediately prepared to leave. Han family young master originally wanted to contact Nitrite Radical to replenish a batch of teleportation scrolls, but in the end he received news that they were out of stock. This surprised Han family young master. If they were out of stock, he believed that he had bought them out. Then, Nitrite Radical must have told him when the stock was out. Was it because of this incident that they were suddenly out of stock? But because of the problem with the mailbox, the trading volume of teleportation scrolls should be limited. Because of this, Han family young master and Nitrite Radical continued their conversation without leaving any evidence. More or less, Nitrite Radical replied. More or less, Han family young master muttered these three words and more or less understood. Then, they could only search for all the scrolls they had and give them to everyone in case of emergencies. However, the most obvious problem was that Yun Zhongmu and the others couldn't directly fly to Moonlit Night City. You guys throw them first. We'll hurry over, Yun Zhongmu said. Let's wait together. You guys can go now, Han family young master said. The time to throw the equipment had to be pushed back. Yun Zhongmu and the others had a smooth journey to Moonlit Night City. The moment they stepped through the city gates, they immediately sent a message to the people in Cloud City. Okay, now check your watch, Han family young master said. Come on you. The crowd jeered. Go find a place for yourselves. We'll throw them out in 15 minutes. With this message, the equipment throwing operation officially began. Although everyone wanted to throw the equipment in a secluded place for the players to search for, the system didn't give them the chance to play this game. In the end, they could only walk to the streets and catch people off guard. 15 minutes countdown begins. 10, 9, 3, 2, 1, throw. Ah! Cries of surprise followed the word, throw. In the next second, all 50 locations in Cloud City and Moonlit Night City exploded. Everyone had their own preferences. Some threw them into the sky, some threw them on the ground, and some pretended to crouch down and quietly put them on the ground. But no matter what, in front of so many eyes, not a single item was thrown without being noticed. However, after this happened, 3 players immediately slapped themselves in the face. The other party threw the equipment mysteriously. Originally, they could have been the only ones to notice, but the 3 of them all cried out in surprise like idiots. As a result, they were instantly drowned out by the crowd. Chapter 876. Before throwing, make sure you know your escape route. This was emphasized by Han family young master. With this guy's dark side, he naturally tried his best to figure out other people's thoughts in the dark. In his mind, it was inevitable for people to surround and kill the person who threw the equipment. Therefore, equipment throwing was actually a high-risk activity. He did not participate in it himself. At this time, he was sitting in Little Ray's bar and drinking very comfortably. Around him was a crowd that was eyeing him covetously. In Cloud City, who didn't know that this Han family young master was a very overpowered character? Now that he was very overpowered and was holding an equipment throwing activity, if this guy sat in the bar, the equipment would probably drop from him. Han family young master's face was too recognizable. Moreover, it was not convenient for him to cover his face. Wasn't he drinking? Han family young master had very strict requirements when it came to drinking. Drinking with his face covered was really too unpleasant. Those who waited patiently for Han family young master to throw equipment were honest people. Of course, there were also people with bad intentions. At this time, they carefully looked around and confirmed that there were no strong combatants such as Qianli, drunk, sword demon, and so on. With their faces covered, they made up their minds and wanted to blow up this Han family young master. It was understandable for these guys to have such thoughts. Nowadays, overpowered players were all moving treasures in the eyes of everyone. After killing them, they were afraid that they wouldn't drop anything. As long as they dropped something, it would definitely be something good. Under such temptation, finally, someone walked on the path of making a mistake. These guys with evil intentions quickly found the same look in the eyes of the crowd. They could communicate with each other very well. When they saw that there were also people who planned to do the same, they didn't think too much and rushed out quickly. Han family young master was a cleric. In their eyes, such a guy with no combat ability was a big fat sheep. Whoever was late would not be able to eat him. Just when these guys were about to squeeze out of the crowd, suddenly, Han family young master spread his hands in the air and shouted, "Coming!" Ah! The crowd erupted. When the Han family young master threw the item, it flew in all directions. The item was very small and flew very fast. In the blink of an eye, it fell into the crowd. However, many people had already seen where the item landed and immediately rushed towards the nearest direction. "What did you throw?" "I don't know, it looks like a ring." "I think it's a badge." "I don't care." "Snatch it." The crowd was in chaos. The masked men were squeezed by the players and couldn't move an inch. They suddenly realized that they were in the center of the crowd. It seemed that no matter which direction, the crowd was converging towards them. That fellow. Before they were drowned, they looked towards the seat where the Han family young master was sitting and saw an extremely sinister smile. With a flash of white light, the man disappeared with a teleportation scroll. He did it on purpose. He had seen through it long ago. By the time he realized this, it was already too late. In the surging crowd, there were you and me, but there was no equipment. Everyone stared at their feet. Finally, someone's eyes lit up and he bent down to pick it up. The others saw the clue and hurriedly tried to stop him. The person fell to the ground, but the moment he fell, he managed to pick up the item. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Fuck, it's a wine bottle cap." The crowd laughed and let him go, continuing to look for their feet. "Wine bottle cap, it's another wine bottle cap. Why is it always a wine bottle cap?" At first, the players who picked up the wine bottle cap didn't think too much about it. This was a pub. Wasn't it normal to have a wine bottle cap on the ground? They could only blame themselves for being too observant. However, after picking up the wine bottle cap from the place where the Han family young master threw the item, someone finally came to a realization. Fuck, did that bastard throw a wine bottle cap? When they turned back, the person at the table was already gone. However, a sharp-eyed player shouted, "Ah, it's there." Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw that there was a piece of paper under the wine glass at the table where the Han family young master had been sitting. Everyone thought that it was a mutated magic scroll, and they rushed forward to snatch it. The player who was lucky enough to get the paper also spat out a mouthful of blood under everyone's gazes. "Fuck, it's a message." Then he read it aloud. "Don't bother me. I don't have any equipment." Some people didn't believe him, but this person generously passed the paper around to everyone. Naturally, whoever read it vomited blood. At the same time, the news of equipment being thrown in other places in the city came. The people in a pub all slapped themselves when they heard the news. "Fuck, I miscalculated." There was one item in each of the 25 places, so the competition was naturally more intense than the one in Little Ray's bar. The scene was chaotic, but the players who threw the items were all prepared and escaped unscathed. However, the process was still thrilling. 18 people were targeted, and 8 of them got away successfully. The other 10 had different degrees of crossfire with the other party. Fortunately, they were able to escape in the end. One of the important reasons was that the people who did this didn't belong to any organization, so after they locked onto their target, they didn't say anything for fear of being discovered. This situation was advantageous for them to escape in the chaotic situation. Of the 10 people who exchanged crossfire, 6 escaped in the chaos, and the other 4 killed the guy who had bad intentions on the spot. What happened in Moonlit Night City was basically the same as in Cloud City. The only difference was that there wasn't such a teasing guy in the pub. After completing the first item throwing quest, the people quickly hid after escaping and summarized the experience and lessons learned from the first time. A total of 7 people still had lingering fear in their hearts. They survived in a thrilling way, and the rest also realized that the risk of mixing in the crowd and throwing items was indeed greater than they thought. They had to think of another way next time. By the time they escaped, the players had already picked up the items they had tossed out. For 50 items, many players who were lucky enough to get their hands on them lost their lives. However, looking at the value of these items, most players who lost their lives felt that it was worth it. Some gossipers quickly showed off their luck to their friends, and the news spread quickly. Soon, even the forums were posted. However, the players who posted only heard about this item, and then it disappeared in the blink of an eye. They were still in a hurry to go back to the game to pick up the items. Although most players still didn't know whether the items were good or not, at least they were really being dropped. This point was already confirmed by the players in the 2 main cities, so they rubbed their fists and looked forward to the next round. The forum was filled with people who were far away from the city and didn't have the opportunity to participate in the 2 cities' activities. After seeing the dropped item, half of them asked what else was there, and the other half begged for teleportation scrolls. As time passed, in this hour, a few more items that had been thrown in the first round appeared on the forum. All of them made people drool with envy. Some players had already complained to the officials, asking for fair treatment and to participate in the "You Throw, I'll Pick event in the 2 cities. Now, the officials were also paying attention to this event, and they even responded to the players. The official statement basically meant, "This is the player's own behavior, it's none of my business." In the blink of an eye, an hour passed. The fighting spirit of the players in the 2 cities that had been stirred up in the first round was somewhat extinguished. Out of 10 players, 8 or 9 were denouncing the very heaven-defying behavior of not throwing the items quickly. The second round quietly arrived. This time, no one saw anyone throw things into the sky, no one saw anyone quietly put things on the ground, no one saw anyone pretend to tie their shoelaces. In the 2 main cities, 25 places each, a total of 50 places, everyone heard a shout at the same time. "Hey! Look over there!" Everyone looked there, and so they saw what they had been waiting for an hour. Crazy snatching again, but this time, the very heaven-defying players didn't expose themselves. They all put the items in a certain place when no one was paying attention, and then gave the order to collectively shout such a shout. Crazy snatching, another round of crazy snatching. Crazy snatching, another round of crazy snatching. The players, who seemed to have lost their fighting spirit after being worn down for an hour, instantly displayed their positive vitality again. Everyone pounced on these 50 secluded corners, fiercely snatching these 50 unknown items. Success, failure, bragging, gossiping, breaking news, everything was a repeat of the previous round. In 2s and 3s on the forum, the items that had been thrown in this round appeared in 2s and 3s. In terms of value, it was comparable to the previous round. As expected, they were all the same items. And some attentive people quickly discovered that there was about an hour between this throw and the previous throw, and during this hour, there was no sound at all. Could it be that they were prepared to throw once an hour? This hidden pattern was discovered by the players very quickly, but how many items were thrown in each time? This should have been obvious, but until now, no one knew. After all, this required the 50 people who had picked up the items to drop at the same time, but who would have the time to do that? People were always like this. If they were lucky once, they would definitely want to be lucky a second time. After these 2 rounds, A total of 100 lucky people were excitedly preparing for the third round. For the third round, the players were also a little prepared. They roughly estimated that it would last for this hour. Seeing that the time was approaching, everyone became more alert. An hour was up. Everyone's ears perked up, and their eyes widened. Cloud City and Moonlight City were currently the two main cities with the most people, but at the same time, they were also the two main cities with the quietest people. In the end, there was no sound, and no one threw anything. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. 10 minutes passed, and there was no news of any items being picked up. The players looked at each other. Who the fuck said that it would be thrown once an hour? Someone had already started cursing. After all, throwing once an hour was everyone's speculation. Someone was very heaven-defying, but he had never said such a thing. Have you finished throwing them? That's it? Damn, that's all? Too many people complained. This kind of complaint definitely wouldn't stop. Even if everyone was given an item, there would always be people who felt that another round was more appropriate. People were always greedy. While the players were discussing, another 10 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Many people already thought that the equipment throwing event might be over, and they were all asking around for news on the forum. So at this moment, the third round of throwing quietly began. This time, very heaven-defying people chose a place with less people. After looking at their escape route, they each chose a method that they felt was reliable and threw the equipment. The equipment was quickly discovered, but the person who threw the equipment was nowhere to be found. This time, it was a silent throw, very much in line with the silent scene of the two cities during the hour. So, quietly, the third round ended. This time, there was no large-scale looting, because the throwing locations were remote places with very few people. At this time, it was really not easy to find 25 such places in the two cities, so they were late by 20 minutes. Everyone felt a little guilty, but Han Family Young Master said, "The rules are set by us, and we can also change them." I said that it would be thrown once an hour, but I didn't say which minute of the hour it would be. Even if it was thrown at the 59th minute, it would still be considered an hour. Compared to the previous two times, the third time was really not as enthusiastic. Many players who heard the news were in disbelief and at a loss. It's over? When did it end? 10 minutes ago? Fuck, why did I only know about it now? The movement of the throwing was small, so the range of the news was small, and it spread slowly. This third round of throwing took quite a long time to be accepted by the players. And this time, the players who picked up the items seemed to be low-key, and the information on the forum was less than the previous time. Is it really going to end? Rumors started to spread again. Everyone felt that this event was going to slowly disappear in this kind of silence, so the fourth round could not be more public. When the hour was up, the first to know about it were not the players waiting in the game, but the players in the offline forum. In the forum, a post suddenly appeared, previewing the 50 coordinates of the two main cities when the fourth round was thrown. Fuck. At this time, the players sitting on the computer and browsing the forum were all sad and angry. They hated it. Although they had first-hand information, they couldn't fly over and snatch the item. In the end, they could only contact their friends and relatives in the two cities to tell them about this news. The players in the two cities were in an uproar. When some people suspected that this post was a prank, they got an answer that it wasn't. This was because the ID of the post was clear, Brother You. The most ferocious Brother You on the forum, and also one of the very overpowered core members, Brother You. No one doubted it anymore, and everyone chose the nearest place to run. This was because it was said that the post was a preview, which meant that they hadn't started throwing yet, so they had to hurry and grab this place. Because of this post, the flow of people in the two cities became concentrated, which was rare. Although there were some players who didn't know about this, there were already empty streets in the two cities. So, at this time, a second post appeared on the forum. Because the location in the preview was too crowded, the thrower couldn't reach the scene, so he had to change it to the following location. Schwa schwa schwa. Another 50 coordinates appeared. Fuck. The players in front of the computer all vomited blood, and those who replied with disdain, while those who contacted their friends and relatives hurriedly contacted them. When the news was sent into the game, this time no one made a sound, and they all quietly turned around and left. On the empty street, 50 very overpowered heroes waited. They needed to wait until someone came out of their line of sight, or else if they threw it now that there was no one there, the equipment might have already been taken by the system. This time, there was no doubt that the archers and bandits had a great advantage. Their speed allowed them to snatch back the second coordinates without any suspense. This time, they didn't come for nothing. They had already seen the masked player. After seeing them, the masked player threw down an item, turned around and left. Another round of crazy running. This round, it wasn't just luck that mattered. It seemed like it depended on one's connections and character attributes. Players who didn't have connections wouldn't be able to receive information from their friends and relatives offline. Players who didn't have movement speed attributes wouldn't be able to win this round of running. At the same time, this round finally let the players know how many items were thrown, and because they were all obtained through friends and relatives offline, this time, there was a collective explosion of 50 items. Equipment, scrolls, precious trade skill materials, and rare quest items. 50 items. Every one of them had their own value, and none of them were dispensable. In comparison, the least valuable item was probably the electric enhancement scroll. However, this only meant that it wasn't valuable. For an electric mage, this item's practical value was the same as a water enhancement scroll. 50 items at once. That's a lot. The players exclaimed. After seeing the value of these 50 items, everyone was embarrassed to say that 50 items at once was not a good number. Moreover, no one suspected that there was anything fishy about this extremely overpowered behavior. The player had thrown out 50 items at once, a total of 200 items. Every one of them was valuable. Even if they swept through the entire auction house and trading street of a main city, they might not be able to find 200 items of such value at once. Moreover, the player had been thrown to you for free. How could you say that it wasn't a good number? The players waited expectantly for the fifth round of benefits. Compared to the previous competition of connections and movement speed, the fifth round had become a competition of luck. The very overpowered player who threw the equipment didn't do anything else after it was time. He just walked towards a random player and whispered, "You're in luck. Follow me." Therefore, the players who followed him received the items that were thrown out in the fifth round. Compared to the previous 3 rounds, this round was even more secretive. Therefore, Brother Yu made a post after the event, announcing that this round had ended and that 50 players had received the gifts. Then 50 players also revealed the promised information. This was supposed to be a competition of pure luck. However, the final results showed that the proportion of female players who had won the prizes was surprisingly high. Among the 50 players, there were 44 female players who had won, and every single one of them was a beauty. There was no need to say anything. Even if most of the players weren't as obvious about this as Yu Tianxinming's and scathed in battle, this was indeed a popular activity. Therefore, under such circumstances, who would want a player who was pleasing to the eye? 44 players found a beautiful player. Being beautiful is also a very lucky thing. Unscathed in battle expressed his opinion. No, this is also a type of strength. The young master of the Han family seriously discussed the matter. Chapter 877. Every hour after that, there were hundreds of different ways to throw items, and not a single one was repeated. For example, auctioning items at a very low price, sending them directly to random players through the mail, posting an announcement on the forum for players to send emails to Brother Yu, and then randomly send them back. Some players who weren't too far away from moonlit night Cloud City were filled with regret. Because the distance was too far, they thought that they definitely wouldn't be able to catch up if they walked. Who knew that the other party would throw items like this, and this torment lasted for an entire day. If they had immediately set off after receiving the news last night, they would have walked for more than 10 hours to reach their destination. Although they would have missed the first few rounds, they wouldn't have missed the later parts. But now, no one knew how long against the heavens would throw items for. Whether or not they should start walking from now on became a worry for these players. If they didn't go and the other party threw items for 3 days straight, they might miss out on their good luck. If they went and the other party threw items halfway, it would also make them vomit blood. In the midst of this dilemma, the players all had their own plans. Some immediately set off, while others gritted their teeth and hoped that the event would end soon. At this moment, every additional round of throwing was like a knife to them. They had the chance to participate in these rounds if they had set off last night. According to the statistics on the forum, Vary Against the Heavens had already gone through 10 rounds of throwing items. If the number remained the same every time, then there would have been 500 items consecutively thrown, including equipment, accessories, scrolls, living materials, rare quest items, and other popular items on the market. Even if the players who were lucky didn't need them for their profession, they would still be able to earn a lot of money. What was even more exciting was that after 10 rounds, Vary Against the Heavens didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. It was already midnight, but the two cities were still bustling with activity. Many players hadn't slept since last night and had stayed up until now. Those who were still persisting were people with extraordinary willpower and a strong gambler's mentality. Apart from that, there were also many players who saw the number of people in these two cities. They felt that they wouldn't be so lucky and had already silently given up. However, these people didn't show up. This was because some of the players who were further away had started their journey last night. There were quite a few players who had traveled for 10 or even 20 hours to reach the two cities. From this, it could be seen that even the most determined people couldn't resist the temptation of reaping without sowing. What do we do next round? In Vary Against the Heavens Guild channel, a member of the item throwing group asked, "I can't throw anymore, I'll throw again tomorrow." Yutian Shenming complained. At first, they found it interesting when they saw the players go crazy, but after seeing it over and over again, they started to feel numb. After becoming numb, they started to pay more attention to the value of the items in their hands. "Why don't we just throw it away this time?" Cloud Twilight said. He and his brothers were not like Imperial Heaven Divine Ming, who did not treat other people's plundering as something fun. They treated it as a mission, so it was natural that they were tired after running around for the entire day. "How many things do you have on hand?" Han Family Young Master asked. "Brother Yu," the statistician, reported, "we brought back a total of 774 items from Inch. We've thrown away 500 of them, so there are 274 left. If we continue like this, it'll take at least another 5 hours." Many people looked like they were about to vomit blood. "Alright, then let's have a climax at the end," the Han family's young master said. "Tell me what to do." After a day of torment, everyone's interest in creating a climax had actually waned. They weren't like the Han family young master, who was passionate about tormenting others. 50 people, 5 pieces for each person. Next, we'll throw 1 piece every 10 minutes. Including the wave we threw at the previous hour, there will be 6 waves in total. Let's make this hour more fulfilling for everyone, Han family young master said. "All right, we'll do as you say," said someone. "For this wave, everyone can throw however they want." Han family young master said. "Can we throw them at each other?" Yutian Shenming asked. The chat was instantly silent. Honestly speaking, everyone was interested in these items, but they were intentionally avoiding it. They were afraid that if they thought too deeply about it, they wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. Even if they weren't taking out items from their class, it was still a large amount of gold. I just saw that everyone seemed to be in low spirits, so I made a joke to liven up the atmosphere," Yutian Shenming immediately said. Even in the chat, the sudden silence made him feel the awkwardness of the atmosphere. Han family young master didn't look down on him for the first time, he only said, "Everyone get ready, it's about time." Boom boom boom, Fiercely's final round began. Because the previous 10 rounds had been a steady 1 hour, the players had already accepted this setting, so many people only started preparing when the time was almost up. However, they couldn't do anything in this 1-hour gap, so many people were trying to figure out how overpowered would throw the equipment in the next round. After 10 rounds, the players felt like they were stuck in a maze. They didn't see the same method repeated. At this time, the last round of fighting had just ended, so it was the time when the players were the most relaxed. Looking at the time, there were still 50 minutes until the next round. Everyone was looking for ways to kill time. Suddenly, a figure appeared on a rooftop in the corner of the main city. He shouted, "The equipment is here." Then he quickly disappeared. No one paid attention to him. Throughout the day, this kind of impersonation and equipment throwing prank had happened countless times. At first, the players fell for it, but then they angrily caught the prankster and killed him. Then they became numb to it. At this time, it had only been 10 minutes since the equipment throwing, and someone had already come out to do it. Everyone looked down on this guy for being so bad at scamming people. However, among many people, there were still some who hoped to get lucky. After a day of training, these people had a deep understanding of overpowered's shamelessness. They thought that these people were capable of using any method. This group of people had always fallen for the prank because they refused to give up any chance to suspect. They were laughed at by many players, but they didn't give up. This time, they finally had a reward. A player who had climbed up the roof with great difficulty found that there really was an equipment on the edge of the roof. The equipment was golden, and it was obvious that it wasn't trash. The player quickly picked it up and immediately fell from the roof in happiness. His head was dizzy from the fall, but he kept shouting, "I got it, I got it." When the surrounding players saw this and thought about it, they knew that it wasn't a prank this time. It was actually real. They were so regretful that they beat their chests and stamped their feet. Similar scenes were happening in 50 places in Cloud Moonlit Night and the two cities. Although the 50 people threw it in different ways, the players' reactions were basically the same. Apart from surprise, there was more surprise. Thrown away, thrown away, thrown away, already thrown away. The news quickly spread across the two cities. Many people who were slow to hear it still couldn't believe it. What's thrown, what's thrown? It's very overpowered. A new round of things has been thrown. What? Already thrown? It's only been 10 minutes. Who knows? Anyway, it's already been thrown. Motherfucker, do you have any credibility? Didn't you say that it would be thrown once an hour? The surrounding people were silent. After a long while, someone said, "Who said that to you?" Indeed, throwing once an hour was a rule that the players concluded themselves. It was very overpowered and had never been publicly announced, although they had always done so. Annoyed, dejected, and cursed. This throw caught too many people off guard. Many players were in a bad mood. It was as if they had predicted this throw in advance, they would definitely be able to snatch the item. Just when there was a deathly atmosphere, a long string of news suddenly came from the street. Thrown, 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 thrown again. Very overpowered, thrown again. Equipment thrown again? Yes, thrown again. Fuck. Someone immediately looked at his watch and found that 10 minutes had passed since the previous throw. Combined with the previous throw, someone immediately came to a realization. Fuck, it's changed to 10 minutes. This was something that was very easy to discover. The players were glad that they had discovered it not too late. 10 minutes. This was a time that passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone rushed to the streets, looking for the masked heroes. Masked people had become the standard image of the players in the two cities. Many eyewitnesses said that the throwers had simple equipment and had no distinguishing features, but they were all masked. Therefore, the masked people became the creatures that the players of the two cities loved and hated. The thieves and assassins of the two cities didn't dare to cover their faces on this day because it was too dangerous. Such strong emotions were unbearable whether it was hate or love. With the observation skills of the Han family young master, of course, he had noticed this detail long ago and naturally reminded everyone. The reason they masked their faces wasn't because they were afraid of being recognized, but because they were afraid of being remembered. But now that masked had become a special appearance, they naturally couldn't use this method anymore. Therefore, in the next few rounds, they very overpowered the natural order of things like lucky draws through the mail. When the players realized that they had to guard their mailboxes, they changed to other methods. At this moment, it was already the end. Even if they were remembered, there wouldn't be any consequences. The throwers all took off their masks and mixed into the crowd. However, the players were still stuck in the era of looking for masked people. They really couldn't keep up with the pace. 10 minutes passed, and no one was discovered. However, 50 items just appeared on the streets without a sound. This time difference was undoubtedly too short. It was so short that the next round had already begun before the news of the throwers' equipment had spread to everyone's ears. The continuous throwing made every player excited. Clouds and Moonlight City was filled with people running wildly. No one could guess what these overpowered people were going to do. Some people climbed onto rooftops to look for suspicious figures. Some people squatted by their mailboxes and waited for this pattern to repeat. Some people even ran to the outskirts of the city. According to statistics, up until now, there hadn't been a single time when items were thrown outside of the main city. Perhaps this method would be used next? The overpowered throwers really didn't care about the players' psychology at all. In short, they did what was convenient. Most importantly, they had to ensure their own personal safety. They had seen the players who had evil intentions and had been trying to find the throwers to kill them. They hadn't even heard a word of thanks until now. Instead, they had been killed. Who could remain calm? This was the craziest hour of the day. It was also the last hour. Every 10 minutes, the players were excited again and again in the middle of the night. When the 750th item was thrown, the players were still waiting for the next 10 minutes. Suddenly, a post appeared on the forums. The next time would be the last time. This time, there would only be one place in each city that would throw items. However, each place would throw 12 items. The biggest climax really came at the end. Although the total number of items thrown this time wasn't as high as the previous times, the lucky person who appeared this time was likely to take all 12 items. There was no doubt that he would be the ultimate winner of today's grand prize. The players were all excited and anxious. They all hoped that the thrower would appear next to them, but they were also worried that the thrower wouldn't appear next to them. Time passed by, and everyone didn't know whether to continue or stop. If they left, what if they threw it at the place they had just walked past? If they didn't leave, what if they threw it at a place they could have walked to? Dang, dang, dang. At this moment, a loud bell rang in Cloud City. The foreign players were confused, but the local players of Cloud City all knew that this was the sound of their Cloud City's bell tower. Usually, the system wouldn't ring this bell tower. However, some bored players would go and randomly ring it from time to time. Today, everyone was focused on picking up equipment. Who would think of playing it? However, at this moment, the bell tower suddenly rang. Everyone looked at the time. It was less than 2 minutes from 1 a.m. Was this a signal from an overpowered person, indicating that the thrower was going to be at the bell tower? Or was someone purposely trying to create some suspense at this sensitive time to distract everyone's attention? Cleverness was often the victim of one's own cleverness. Smart people had too many ideas, and they were afraid that the sudden ringing of the bell tower was a trap. They were unlike the straightforward players, who immediately ran over to investigate the abnormal situation. They didn't make this trip in vain. The last throw in Cloud City was going to be at the bell tower. This ringing was to give the players an early warning. There were people under the bell tower. When they heard the ringing, many people began to run upstairs. However, this bell tower was the tallest building in Cloud City. From the bottom to the top, even the fastest players would find it difficult to run all the way up in 2 minutes. Moreover, the stairs of the bell tower spiraled upward. It was very possible to run too fast and get dizzy. These players who were in a hurry to run upstairs had undoubtedly made a mistake. They originally occupied an advantageous position, but because they wanted to make it more advantageous, they missed the opportunity. Just as they were halfway up the stairs, those who ran too fast felt dizzy and wanted to vomit. They suddenly heard a surging shout from outside the building. Everyone quickly looked for a place where they could look out of the building. They saw all the players raise their heads and shout in surprise. Something just flew past them in a flash. That's right, it was equipment, scrolls, items, and money. These were all money. They should have been able to stand downstairs. They should have had the opportunity to receive the large amount of money, but because of a momentary error in judgment, they lost such an opportunity. They could only watch the pie falling from the sky fall into someone else's mouth. They saw people fighting for these items downstairs. They didn't feel that it was a tragic scene. They only felt sad for missing such an opportunity. They had no chance to get the item. However, some people immediately remembered that the person who threw the item was still upstairs. They continued to rush forward, trying their luck. But there was no one on the roof at this time. Any random person with a teleportation scroll would have already flown away. Moonlit Night City didn't have a bell tower, so they couldn't do something like this. However, Moonlit Night City also had their own tradition, flag planting. In this place where the people were fierce, there were fights every day in the leveling area. Flag planting was something that they invented, and it was a way to avoid some trouble. They would mark their own leveling area and plant their own team's flag. For example, after the 10 Guilds Alliance planted their flag, no one would dare to provoke them again. Otherwise, if there were always people who came to fight and negotiate with them, how would they be able to level for the day? At this time, in the center of Moonlit Night City, 2 minutes before dawn, such a flag suddenly appeared. This was a flag that the players in Moonlit Night City didn't recognize. The flag seemed to have been made on the spot. There were no exquisite pictures on it, only a large word, defy. This strange appearance of this flag caused a commotion among the players. Some people had already guessed that this was a signal given by defy, but what did it mean? Did it mean that the last round of throwing items would be thrown here? However, since the appearance of the flag, this place had been surrounded by a sea of people. How could defy come out? Teleportation scrolls. Many people thought of this, so everyone immediately began to grab the best position near the flag. The bloody battle that took place in these 2 minutes was more intense than any other leveling area competition in the history of Moonlit Night City. 2 minutes passed in a flash, and the place where the flag was planted suddenly glowed with white light. It really was a teleportation circle. The players' expectations were not wrong, but no one appeared in the teleportation circle. What appeared were 12 items piled on the ground. Yes, equipment, scrolls, props, money, these were all money. Everyone rushed forward without any regard for their own lives. Some people had already turned into white light halfway through the process. Who would be able to get it in the end? This was an answer that no one could predict. At the same time, Brother UID posted another post on the forum, announcing the end of the day's event. Butterfly Knot. The I Throw You Pick event has ended. What will be the reactions of all parties? Please see the next chapter. Chapter 878. After more than 10 hours, a total of 774 valuable items were thrown out. These were easily calculated figures. Even the players who had worked hard for more than 10 hours to no avail had to admit that this was an unprecedentedly large sum of money, even though they were filled with dissatisfaction. They could only blame their bad luck, but no matter what, they couldn't find anything that defied the natural order. It was very heaven-defying. The method of throwing the item in every round had also been calculated. Although it was very shameless to change, it had to be said that each method was quite fair and just, without any hint of favoritism. In such a situation, who else could they blame other than their own luck? The players who were lucky enough to pick up treasures finally had some free time and began to brag about it on the forum. Someone on the forum specially organized a post for these people to post. Many players were drooling as they read the post, while cursing the players who won the prizes to die a horrible death. However, seeing that many of the players who got the items died due to losing control of the situation, everyone felt a little comforted. Everyone knew that whether it was losing control or losing control, it wasn't a coincidence. After all, this was a game and there were no restrictions. If there were no laws in reality, people who won 5 million on the street might not even have the life to spend it. Did Very Unbelievable have a grudge with Ing Chi Studio? No one cared about this anymore. Instead, some people asked when Very Unbelievable was going to rob Ing Chi Studio again, saying that they were all looking forward to this day. The game company let out a long sigh of relief after the event ended. Although it caused them a lot of trouble, it didn't cause any big trouble. Moreover, the enthusiasm of the players influenced them. The big boss personally said that they would learn from it. Learn from the way the players were aroused. The employees were speechless. Using such a method to arouse the players' emotions was a piece of cake for the game company, but of course, they couldn't do it. But what else could they do? Be flexible. The boss left after saying a few words, leaving the employees depressed. In these 10 hours, the one who suffered the most was of course the boss of Ingchi Studio, Gai Shiqing. To be honest, the people in the Eagle Group and his studio's business weren't any different. Therefore, although they looked worried and angry about the loot, it was hard to tell what they were really thinking. In the end, only the real owner of the items, Gai Shiqing, was heartbroken and wanted to commit suicide. As a studio, he had received a notice from the game company to temporarily ban the trading of teleportation scrolls. He knew that the mailbox issue was just a cover to control the number of people who could go to Cloud City and Night City. In the end, Gai Shiqing was also controlled. Even if he had people in the two cities who had the scrolls, they couldn't send them over. As the largest studio in the industry, he still had some connections with the game company. However, it was an emergency and he didn't have the time to mediate. Moreover, the big boss of the game company was personally paying attention to this matter, so mediating wouldn't be of much help. Gai Shiqing gritted his teeth and tried his best to contact the low-level employees in the two cities, asking them to bring back the equipment as soon as possible and reward them. However, no amount of reward could match the value of the equipment itself. Employees at this level usually didn't even have the right to enter the warehouse. It was clear that they were not trusted enough. At this time, the chances of finding the equipment were slim. Even if they did find it, they could sell it themselves and earn more than handing it over to the organization for rewards. In the current system of the studio, the higher-level employees were very formal and restricted, but it was hard to say for the low-level temporary employees. Those who wanted to pursue their studio as a career might hand it over to the organization for a promotion and a raise, but most of them just took a part-time job and earned as much money as they could. Matchless Hero knew that it wouldn't make much of a difference, but he still held onto a glimmer of hope. Every hour he tossed his money away, there was no news from the two cities. He could only watch helplessly as his money was tossed away. It was his money that was being tossed away. Fortunately, Gai Shiqing wasn't in the game this time. Otherwise, he would definitely be kicked out by the system. Looking at the joyful discussion of the players in the forum, Gai Shiqing was quite depressed. He ordered the gunners to mingle in the forum, trying to criticize the players from a moral point of view. He wanted them to realize that they were in the wrong and that they were helping the evildoers. The gunners were also paid to do what the players said. However, they felt that this was childish. If the players could return the equipment they found to Age's studio, world peace would have been achieved a long time ago. As the gunners expected, this kind of persuasion didn't work. The players didn't even bother to respond. At most, they would look down on them and say that they couldn't eat grapes. Angry, Gai Shiqing went to find the website reporters to look down on this behavior. However, the website reporters said without hesitation that it was impossible to look down on this map. Their website was supported by the players. If they looked down on everyone, the website would lose its reputation. After that, they even tried to persuade Gai Shiqing. So what if they look down on you? You can't find any of the equipment you lost. How much is it worth to look down on you? Gai Shiqing was so lonely. Things were completely out of his control. People threw his things, robbed his things, took his things happily and talked about his things. However, he didn't even have a chance to participate. Gai Shiqing's mouse was almost crushed by Gai Shiqing. Fortunately, 5 Nights wasn't next to Gai Shiqing. Otherwise, Gai Shiqing wouldn't be able to control his emotions and would most likely kick 5 Nights to death. Just like that, Gai Shiqing followed this activity until 1 o'clock at night. How many items did Gai Shiqing have? Gai Shiqing knew this, and so did Gai Shiqing. When the throwing started from 12 to 1 o'clock, Gai Shiqing, who had been counting in his heart, knew that everything he had was going to be thrown away. Not even a strand of hair would be left. Moreover, he knew one thing better than anyone else. Gai Shiqing really threw away everything he had looted. He didn't keep anything for himself. Even Gai Shiqing was surprised. These people really wanted to piss him off. At 1 o'clock sharp, Brother Yu announced the end of the event on the forum. The players began to reflect on the event and discuss it. Unparalleled Wonder hadn't received a single message. He had pinned his hopes on his people snatching the loot, but it didn't happen. Perhaps the loot had happened, but the loot definitely hadn't been handed over. Matchless Wonder had logged into the game. 5 knights from the studio, Forever from the Eagle Party, and the others were all online. After suffering such a huge blow, they all guessed that the boss would retaliate crazily. The Eagle Party was ready, and 5 knights was waiting to be kicked to death by the boss. In the new warehouse, Gai Shi-Ying met his loyal subordinates. The warehouse that was looted by Gai Shi-Ying had been cleaned up. Without the 774 items, the warehouse looked empty. 5 knights wanted to quickly restock the warehouse and restore it to its original state. However, after thinking about it, he felt that such a childish thing was meaningless. As for Eternal, he was thinking a lot more. He thought about Gai Shi-Ying's refusal to reconcile with Gai Shi-Ying. Gai Shi-Ying's unyielding attitude forced Gai Shi-Ying to continue opposing them, which led to this tragedy. With Forever's understanding of Gai Shi-Ying, he felt that Gai Shi-Ying's refusal to reconcile with Gai Shi-Ying wasn't due to his emotions. He must have a plan. However, it was extremely heaven-defying. Such a powerful counterattack was definitely out of his expectations. He always knew the source of Matchless Hero's confidence. No matter how the players fought with his gaming studio, they wouldn't be able to touch his foundation. However, this time, Matchless Hero's confidence had been shattered and his foundation had been shaken. What about the previous poaching? Unparalleled Wonder had suffered a series of setbacks. Was it just a coincidence that they had poached Unparalleled Wonder's members? If this was also instigated in secret, it meant that this person knew that they had to use a special method to fight against the workshop. Fighting and killing wouldn't solve the root of the problem. At this point, what would Gai Shi-Ying's next step be? Forever kept thinking about this question. He had some ideas, but he didn't say anything. He only wanted to hear what Gai Shi-Ying had to say. Gai Shi-Ying walked around the room, his expression calm. After walking around, he came before everyone and said, "The problem with the mailbox hasn't been completely solved." "I know." Forever nodded. 5 knights didn't say anything. It was already courageous of him to stand there. He didn't dare to say anything else. This is just a way for the officials to limit this incident. There definitely isn't any real problem with the mailbox. However, since it's just a pretense, I don't think they'll immediately announce that the problem has been solved. "It'll take some time," Gai Shi-Ying said. Forever nodded again. "How's the matter I asked you to do?" Gai Shi-Ying asked. "It's not going well," Forever said, "especially after today's incident. These people know what's in our warehouse. Most of them don't want money. They want some specific equipment or items." Gai Shi-Ying's eyes twitched. Indeed, today's incident had also exposed In Chi Studios' background. From the items that were thrown out, anyone with a discerning eye could see Age Studios' business strategy and marketing methods. Some of the items that had a price but no market were thrown out. This naturally revealed that the price but no market was intentionally created by the studio. As such, the more scheming players would naturally think that Age Studio had more of these items. These items might not be sold even if they had money, so it was obviously more valuable to directly ask for them. What do they want? Gai Shi-Ying took a deep breath and asked. "I've written it all down." Forever took out a few pieces of paper from his pocket and handed it to Gai Shi-Ying. Gai Shi-Ying took a look. The paper first gave a detailed introduction of each person's information, analyzed their value, and finally marked out their requests. These people came from various main cities in the parallel world. They all had one thing in common. They were all core members of their respective main cities. They had a wide range of friends and were quite popular. "Are they all reliable?" Gai Shi-Ying asked. "I've selected all of them. They're all loyal people who keep their word. I don't think they'll use this method to trick us," Forever said. "How many people are there in total?" 31 people, Forever replied. Gai Shi-Ying looked through the information again. There were 31 people, but their backgrounds might not necessarily be from 31 guilds. Some of them had a wide range of friends and could have multiple backers. Some of them could even have the backing of an entire city. All right, give it to them. Guy Shi gritted his teeth. Forever nodded and said, should we arrange a time for everyone to meet? Guy Shi nodded. You can arrange the time. When we meet, give it to them. Understood. Guy Shi turned to look at Five Nights. Five Nights had his head lowered like a child who had done something wrong. Guy Shi sighed and asked, have you found someone like that? Five Nights didn't even dare to raise his head. Not yet. He had caused a disaster, but Guy Shi still hadn't reprimanded him. They were both doing their jobs, and Forever's side was doing everything in an orderly manner. Five Nights, on the other hand, had no idea what to do. Five Nights was feeling quite guilty. But Guy Shi asked, we've never met someone like that before, so we don't know where to start. I've already mobilized people, Five Nights said. Hurry up. Guy Shi said simply. He didn't reprimand him, nor did he encourage him. Who was he looking for? Forever muttered to himself. He had only just found out that Guy Shi had given Five Nights this order. He was becoming more and more certain that Guy Shi had some sort of plan. This plan must have been made when he decided not to reconcile with Very Defiant. The warehouse robbery was probably not part of the plan, but it didn't seem to affect the plan. But what was the purpose of this plan? From what he was told to do, it seemed like it was Very Defiant's revenge. It didn't seem to have anything to do with Guy Shi business. Was this really a battle of personal feelings? Forever didn't believe it. He could clearly see that Guy Shi was more of a merchant than a player. Every decision he made was from a merchant's point of view. He couldn't see it because he was just a player. Forever sighed. He didn't ask or think about it anymore. All right, you guys go do what you need to do. Guy Shi waved his hand and left with Five Nights. Cloud City, Very Defiant's base. A single room couldn't fit all the members of the guild, so all of the bases were opened up. Almost everyone moved their taverns into the guild base. The celebration took place in different places at the same time. With a common guild channel, common communication could be carried out here. This feels good, this feels so good, ha! Cloud Midnight waved his bottle and shouted. The operation ended at 1 p.m., and there were still 10 minutes until 2 p.m. Although Cloud Midnight's alcohol tolerance wasn't outstanding, he was already drunk. It was clear how excited he was. His brothers had the same temperament as him. After 50 minutes, most of the men from the 10 Guilds Alliance were already drunk. Those who weren't drunk were those who didn't drink, and those who had a higher alcohol tolerance. However, they would probably be drunk within half an hour. They were ruthlessly suppressed by Ying Qi and the Eagle Group. Today, they could finally vent the anger in their chests. For these brave men of Moonlit Night City, there was nothing more satisfying than this. Haha, it would be great if there were a few girls around. Zhu Xian was even more unrestrained when he was drunk. Damn you, you pervert, get out of here. Don't embarrass yourself here, Cloud Midnight scolded Zhu Xian even though he was drunk. It was a skill that went deep into his bones. There's a beauty here. Zhu Xian staggered as he walked. He's really drunk, really? Two of Yun Zhongmu's brothers who weren't drunk hurriedly came over and dragged Zhu Xian away. This bastard, he couldn't even recognize the young master of the Han family, and he actually wanted to tease him. Even though he was drunk, he was still half sober. Brother Yu Tian Shenming, and the others hid in a corner and secretly observed Han family young master's reaction. To their disappointment, Han family young master didn't react at all. Didn't he notice? Yu Tian Shenming mumbled. Impossible. Unscathed in battle was certain. I thought there would be a good show. Brother Yu closed his notebook regretfully. In the other corner of the room, Drifting was holding a glass of wine and talking to Sword Demon. Boss Sword Demon, seeing that you guys are so happy, do you still think my plan is too much? That's two different things, Sword Demon replied indifferently. He was probably the only one in the room who was still sober after drinking. Obviously, Sword Demon wasn't excited about this. How regretful. When I threw the equipment today, I should have put 2 in my pockets, Drifting said. As long as you're still in the game, you have a chance to get any equipment. Sword Demon patted him. Well said, well said. Cheers to you, Drifting said and drank his glass. Sword Demon also drank his glass. Let's talk business, Drifting said. What? Sword Demon asked. Will the organization reimburse me for the portal scroll? Drifting asked. Sword Demon smiled. Of course. Ha, I was joking. That thing is nothing, Drifting said. Hee, of course, it's not what you really need, Sword Demon said. Then what do I need? Drifting asked. I'm not sure. But I saw it, Sword Demon said. What did you see? Drifting was confused. You know what I saw, Sword Demon said. Drifting's face suddenly changed. You still have good friends in Eagle Group, right? Sword Demon said. It's the same here. I have good friends here too. How come I haven't seen Qianli all day? Drifting looked around. Chapter 879. Drifting seemed to want to change the topic, but he knew that it wasn't a joke. He could just play dumb. He looked around as if he was looking for Gu Fei, but in fact, he was looking around to see if anyone was paying attention to him and Sword Demon. Fortunately, most of the people in the room were drunk. How could those who didn't drink stay with a room full of drunkards? They all ran out to get some fresh air. Drifting looked back at Sword Demon. It was only then that he realized what the sword ghost meant when he said, as long as you're still in the game, you'll have a chance to obtain any equipment you want. He just didn't get it at the time. Drifting looked around and looked back. Sword Demon was looking at him. Drifting took a deep breath and said, Tell me. I want to see if you're right. Drifting knew that Sword Demon wasn't someone who liked to bluff or trick others. If he said he saw it, then he really saw it. Drifting knew that he was afraid of being seen, but seeing wasn't enough to understand the whole process. He needed to make a lot of deductions. Drifting wanted to hear Sword Demon's deductions. You are in contact with someone in the Eagle Group. This person knows about our plan, so he helped you prepare. He marked the items you needed and placed them somewhere in the warehouse. Of course, he clearly described the location to you. So, when we teleported into the warehouse, you immediately went to retrieve these items. Then, you randomly picked up some other items to complete your task. These things are your main purpose. I think this part is correct, right? Sword Demon said. Yes. Drifting nodded. Let's think about it further. This plan of yours has been brewing for a long time. That teleportation scroll of yours might have been specially made for this plan. Our fight within Chi Studio gave you a chance, so you spared no effort to make this plan happen. Even after I refused, you took the risk to cooperate with Old Yun. Is it important? Sword Demon said. Drifting smiled. It's not important. I just want it. Sword Demon nodded. The person you're working with is a member of the Eagle Group. They often go in and out of these warehouses, but they still use this method. It seems like Ing Chi is very careful about sensitive places like warehouses. The members of the Eagle Regiment always work as a group, which is a form of mutual supervision. It's not easy for him to find a partner within the regiment, because if the other party refuses, he'll be exposing himself. It's the same as me going to find Old Yun. That's why you said I was taking a risk, said Drifting. The Sword Demon nodded. It seems that my inference is correct? That's right, Drifting admitted. Sword Demon was not a fool, and he was careful enough. He was not surprised to find out to this extent. As for the reason, it seems that I don't need to ask. You just said that you want it. Sword Demon said. Drifting nodded. We each take what we need. You don't want to sell it for money, do you? Sword Demon asked. Of course not, said Drifting. I'm here to play the game, not to make money. Then it seems that your partner is here for money? Even if he gets the equipment, it's not convenient for him to use it. Sword Demon said. That's right. If he sneaks into our operation to do this, he won't even face the danger of being exposed. If he loses something, Ing Chi will only blame it on us. He won't suspect anyone else, Sword Demon said. That was his original plan, but... Drifting said with a bitter smile. He glanced at a player in the room who had been drinking by himself. He didn't expect us to drop our equipment so transparently. Even the players on the forum could accurately calculate the total number of items we dropped. That guy didn't set this up just to watch the fun, did he? Regarding the real number of items, there is only one party that knows it, and that is Ing-Chi's studio. The sword demon nodded. He understood what drifting meant. 774. This data was their own calculation, but it might not be true. If someone took 1 or 2 items and didn't hand them in, they would be able to find out. In contrast, after the studio took stock of the warehouse, they could calculate how many items were stolen. This fellow's way of doing things has caused the gamers to conduct a human flesh search and inventory. Coupled with the verification of the gaming studios, when the gamers get their data out and touch our 774's data, those who hid their equipment and didn't hand it over or those who took the equipment and didn't throw it away will likely be exposed. This guy seems to say that he doesn't care about hiding equipment, but in fact, he is secretly checking everyone. Drifting said. Of course, the sword demon knew who Drifting was talking about. He was more familiar with the Han family young master than Drifting, but his way of thinking was different from these dark people. That was why he didn't notice the Han family young master's intention. Now that Drifting pointed it out, he was sure that the Han family young master would do it, and the possibility was very high. The random distribution of equipment was only a restriction on the surface. In fact, he was secretly supervising them. This was indeed the guy's style. However, this kind of statistical check was a bit unreliable. So the lucky 774 players were honest enough to reveal the truth? Ing-Chi's studio might have reported a higher number and accused them of hiding their loot under the guise of throwing equipment away. This method seemed a bit crude to verify the authenticity of the 774. However, other than that, there seemed to be no better way. The sword demon was confused. He had always firmly believed in his friends, but on this point, young Master Han was the complete opposite of him. The Han family young master once said that he only believed for the sake of believing. The sword demon didn't refute. He knew that his belief was unrealistic, but he still did it sincerely. He believed that no one would hide equipment. The Han family young master was checking this matter. The sword demon didn't want to see the answer. He even felt that this kind of test wasn't reliable. It seemed like he was trying to absolve himself of the possible answer. In fact, with the power of human search on the internet, the final conclusion was more reliable. The Han family young master's method was more reliable. Drifting didn't know that the sword demon was thinking so much, so he continued, but at least we know that the number 774 really exists. At least, after the studio did an inventory, they probably realized that the real number is higher than this 774. I mean, the 774 isn't tampered with. Do you think your friend will be exposed in this situation? Asked the sword demon. Under normal circumstances, Ing-Chi will naturally think that we hid a part of it, so the data doesn't match. However, if Inga knows us well enough and is even sure that we won't do such a thing, then he will be in great danger, Drifting said. What about the actual situation? Actually, we've all heard about what Yong said. He's an old friend who is familiar with you and young Master Han. Although young Master Han was the one who planned most of our operations, the one who truly guided us was you, Sword Phantom Boss. You said that you would throw everything away, but you kept a part of it for yourself. This is obviously not your character, Sword Phantom Boss. Yong knows this very well, so I'm afraid Ing-Chi is as sure of our strategy as we are. So, the only thing left is the suspicion that we have now. Did someone tamper with the data? If Ing-Chi is careful enough, I think he'll also think that our people might have tampered with the data, and their people might have done the same thing, said Drifting. The sword demon let out a long sigh. You've thought of all this. You can get the data from us first. It seems that your friend has done something to cover it up? To be honest, it's not easy. He thought he could cover it up permanently, but the Han family young master's plan caused too many voices and discussions. He might have to change his plan, said Drifting. What about you? What's your plan? To be honest, the sword demon didn't care much about Ing-Chi or the Eagle Group. My plan is to listen to Boss Sword Demon's plan, said Drifting. I don't understand you, said the sword demon. Of course, because you and I aren't the same kind of person, said Drifting. You believe in friends, you value relationships, and you value loyalty. I'm different from you. What about you? Asked the sword demon. I'm a super selfish guy. I play games to entertain myself. I try everything to achieve my goal. That's how I feel happy. You don't need friends. Friends? I treat everyone as a friend. But compared to pleasing myself, friends are secondary to me, said Drifting. It seems that we are indeed different, said the sword demon. Indeed. Then next, it depends on your plan. Do you want me to leave, stay, or not let me walk out of this door? Said Drifting. The sword demon smiled. You should leave. How long can I keep you here? Killing you is more to vent Chi's anger. I don't want to do such a heroic thing. But don't expect us to reimburse you for the scroll. You used us, and it's not free. Ha, well said. Drifting also laughed. There were no seats in the room. Everyone was standing, so he didn't have to stand up. He turned around and was about to leave. He hadn't even taken 2 steps when he suddenly stopped and turned back to speak to the sword ghost. Chi won't give up just like that. They seem to have some sort of plan, and it's even before we do it. You guys should pay more attention. Thank you. I won't see you out. You don't have to see me out. Maybe one day, we'll run into each other again. Drifting smiled and left. Chapter 880. Drifting left just like that. There were many players in the room who saw it, but they didn't take it too seriously. After leaving the room, Drifting also left the very overpowered guild. When the system message was sent, the players noticed it. At this time, there were many people staring at the guild channel. Although the system message disappeared in a flash, some people still saw it. Hey, Drifting left the guild? What's going on? Brother Yu's gossipy nature didn't diminish. The first thing he saw and the first thing he asked was in the small channel of the elite group. He saw that Drifting and Sword Demon chatted for a while, then left the guild. Drifting must have said goodbye to Sword Demon. Sword Ghost only responded with a grunt. Wow, today is really a good day. Yutian Shenming was overjoyed when he heard the news. He deliberately looked at the system message, player Drifting left the guild, in the guild channel and read it 180 times. No matter how he looked at it, he felt very happy. What's going on? What's going on? Brother Yu was eager to gossip. Drifting, Sword Demon said. Although everyone was using the chat channel to communicate, the room wasn't too big. Brother Yu was already next to Sword Demon while sending the message. He looked at Sword Demon's expression when he sent the message and felt that there was something to dig out. Brother Yu was proud of his keen intuition for gossip. Sword Demon was helpless. Brother Yu wanted to gossip. If you didn't tell him, it would be more painful than killing him. Sword Demon was a kind person, so he could only tell Brother Yu. As the two were talking, someone knocked on the door. The person at the door opened it, but it was the reporter Mumu duo. The people in the room all knew these two, so they weren't too surprised by their arrival. Nobody knew that the person who came to interview them wouldn't be him, so he shouted into the room, "The big reporter is here." Then he ignored them. Whoever wanted to greet them could greet them. There wasn't as much etiquette in the game as there was in reality. Mudo came in by himself. The one who greeted the two of them was the Han family young master. As soon as he saw the Han family young master, Duo Mumuduo's face turned sullen. He came over and said, "Boss, you've made us suffer." Han family young master was shocked. Is there such a thing? It can't be, right? Why not? Duo Mumu was a duo. When they came out for interviews, Duo Mumu spoke more, so his expression was naturally more vivid. He looked like he wanted to cry but had no tears. You suddenly made such a move. I can't wrap up my previous report. Now, no one cares about the dispute between you and Chi. Isn't it a joke that my tracking report ended up with a strong start and a weak finish? Duo Mumuduo's depression was real. It was rare for such a grand event to happen in the game. There were disputes, battles, top experts in the game, all sorts of grand teams, the biggest gaming studio in the industry, and even burglary and revenge. It was a topic that people would discuss about right and wrong. Duo Mu Duo Yuan was prepared to make good use of such a gorgeous theme. The previous report was counterattacked by gunmen. Even the negative reports from other websites and media outlets were within their expectations. They wanted to first trigger such a debate, then carefully uncover the truth of the matter. Not only would they attract attention, but they would also be able to slap the faces of their competitors. They would be killing two birds with one stone. Who would have thought that Against the Heavens would act so quickly? In the blink of an eye, they had started throwing equipment, and the whole world knew about it. In the blink of an eye, no one paid attention to the topic that they had worked hard to create. No one cared about the truth that they were preparing to uncover. Although it couldn't be said to be a loss to their website, for Duo Mudwa, it was a great expectation that turned into nothing in the blink of an eye. So that's what you're talking about. Isn't throwing equipment a more popular topic? There's no other way. We can only do this report, Duo Mumu said helplessly. From his professional point of view, he still felt that the conflict between the two large groups was a better topic. The throwing of equipment was just a farce. It would be over after the farce. Debate? At most, there would be some people who couldn't eat grapes spitting out their sour water. This farce really couldn't attract long-term attention. As soon as it ended, the number of players online and the number of replies on the forum dropped drastically. What topic are you planning to do now? Han Family Young Master asked. Of course I want to count the lucky ones this time. I also want to summarize the list of items that were thrown. I think you guys should have these items, right? How about it? Is it convenient to announce it? Duo Mumu asked. No problem. Han Family Young Master seemed to be prepared. He handed the list of 774 items to Duo Mumu. 774 items, all thrown away? Duo Mumu asked as he took it. Han Family Young Master didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his glass and drank. Duo Mumu looked down at the list, but he didn't hear a reply from Han Family Young Master. He looked up and saw that this person didn't seem to hear his question. Just as he was about to ask again, he suddenly realized something. Whether or not they were all thrown away, there was no guarantee. It was suspicious. But it wasn't convenient for the other party to say this, so he deliberately chose to remain silent. Are the people in charge of throwing the items here? We want to interview them one by one and hear their feelings. See if there's anything interesting in the process. It can be considered a digression. Duo Mumu said. They're here but... Han Family Young Master didn't say anything more. As a famous reporter, Duo Mumu knew from his own observations that if the people in this room were to be interviewed, the report would probably be read like a novel. I just want to make an appointment. This isn't too important. Duo Mumu said. Han Family Young Master nodded and pointed to a corner of the room. The wine is over there. Help yourselves. Duo Mumu's dream was to be an objective and fair professional reporter. Even if he was acquainted with extremely powerful people, he didn't want to directly stand on their side and participate in their celebration. At this time, he was searching in a room full of drunkards. He wanted to find a guy who wasn't too drunk and ask him something to make this trip more worthwhile. After looking around, the Sword Demon, who wasn't drunk at all, was naturally noticed by them. Sword Demon's identity was so prominent, so it was really valuable to interview him. Thus, Sword Demon had just gotten rid of Brother Yu, the amateur gossiper, when in the blink of an eye, he was targeted by two professional paparazzi. The night passed just like that. Duo Mumu's professional judgment was very accurate. The matter of throwing equipment became hot quickly and cold quickly. After a night, the number of people discussing this matter immediately decreased a lot. Some gossipers originally predicted that Ing Chi would jump out and curse at Very Defying for tormenting Ing Chi's studio's materials. Who would have thought that Ing Chi would receive a huge blow this time, but he didn't have the slightest reaction. Very Defying and Ing Chi's roles seemed to have been switched. Before, Ing Chi had the upper hand in the forum's public opinion, and Very Defying had no reaction. Now, Very Defying had ruthlessly retaliated, and Ing Chi had quietened down. The players couldn't understand the intentions of these two parties, and without new gossip, the gossipers had mostly dispersed. Where did the 774 items go? There didn't seem to be many people who wanted to get to the bottom of it. Gu Fei didn't go online for the whole day yesterday. He didn't participate in the throwing of equipment at all. He basically didn't go on the forum, so he didn't even know what happened. As soon as he went online, he was pulled over by Yutian Shenming, enscathed in battle and the others to describe yesterday's grand occasion. After listening for half an hour, he reacted. "Oh, you guys threw the equipment, right? Damn, you don't know." Yutian Shenming and enscathed in battle realized that they were playing the lute to a cow. "How would I know?" Gu Fei said. "That's too bad, it's your fault for not coming yesterday. Let me tell you." And so the story began again. At this moment, in another main city far away in the parallel world, Ying Qi's boss, Matchless Wonder, had grandly cleared out one of their taverns in this main city. He was prepared to personally meet with the heroes of the parallel world that Everlasting had carefully selected from each main city. Everlasting and 5 knights were now Matchless Wonder's left and right arms. They stood on either side of Matchless Wonder. The 3 of them didn't say a word as they quietly counted down the minutes and seconds. "Someone's here." At this moment, a person came in from outside the tavern and called out. It was the leader of Group 2, Soaring Eagle. He had brought some people with him to keep watch outside. Matchless Wonder cleared his throat and braced himself. Soaring Eagle had already lured the other party in. There were 3 people who had come. From their demeanor, it was obvious that the one in the middle was the leader. "Hello, what's your name?" Matchless Wonder personally went up to greet them. "Fei Tian Tong." The one who replied was indeed the one in the middle. Although Everlasting had contacted each of them, it was all through emails. He didn't know what they looked like, but he was very familiar with everyone's information. When he heard this name, he immediately sent a private message to Matchless Wonder. "Fei Tian Tong, the founder of Ginma City's Level 6 Guild, Tower of Babel. Although he's not the guild leader now, he's still a very reputable core member in the guild. He's currently ranked 8th on the warrior leaderboard. Because the members of Eagle Group were originally famous people on the leaderboard, the losses they suffered in this battle caused the level leaderboard to change once again. Honestly speaking, in the face of the harsh punishment of losing a level upon death in the parallel world, there was no way for them to pay attention to the changes on the leaderboard. Brother Fei Tian, it's an honor to meet you. I'm Matchless Wonder from Ying Qi Workshop. Matchless Wonder was familiar with the way players interacted with each other, so he immediately went up to greet Fei Tian Tong. Matchless Wonder's name had been quite famous recently. He had been ridiculed by the players as the unlucky star recently. The one who had competed with him for this title was his former rival, Cloud Twilight. After Cloud Twilight was targeted by Eagle Group, he lost a few levels. Later on, the 10 Guilds Alliance was disbanded. Those who didn't know the inside story would naturally think that he was extremely unlucky. "Hello." Fei Tian Tong and Matchless Wonder greeted each other before turning to look behind him. Everlasting. When Everlasting saw Fei Tian Tong staring at him, he smiled and introduced himself. "It's an honor to meet you." Fei Tian Tong nodded. On the other side, 5 Knights was also about to say the name. He was prepared to say it out loud when Fei Tian Tong looked over, but he didn't expect Fei Tian Tong to look away. 5 Knights was depressed. His identity didn't seem to be enough at this moment. Chapter 881. Among those present, Fei Tian Tong and Forever were influential figures among the players. The players looked down on the people in the gaming studios. Unparalleled Wonder was the boss of the gaming studio, and 5 Knights was the director of the gaming studio. He had a high status in the gaming studio, but in the eyes of the big players, he was just a small fry. Wu Yi, who had been ignored, could only go and introduce himself to the undying beggar. He stood silently behind Matchless Genius. Unexpectedly, Unparalleled Wonder turned his head and said to him, "Go get some wine." Chief Supervisor Wu Yi was immediately demoted to the role of a servant. 5 Knights, who had just been demoted, went to get some wine. Unparalleled Wonder and Fei Tian Tong drank and chatted happily. The 4 followers stood behind their boss and stared at each other. Forever and 5 Knights were mentally prepared. They knew what kind of characters they would become, but Fei Tian Tong's 2 followers were not. They were all players. Even if one was a guild leader and the other was a commoner, there was no such thing as hierarchy. This kind of situation where one drank while the other stood would never happen. But now that the other party was putting on airs, they could only use this method to maintain the situation. The two brothers were no less depressed than 5 knights. Fortunately, Unparalleled Wonder was a mature businessman. After drinking with Fei Tiantong, he greeted the two of them personally. "Why are you two standing? Have a seat. What's your name?" The two players saw that their boss greeted them, and their vanity was satisfied. They didn't stand on ceremony and sat down after giving their names. Forever and Forever didn't have any information on them. Unparalleled Wonder greeted them and said to the three, "Make yourselves at home. I have guests coming." As soon as he finished speaking, another person came in. This time, he was alone. Unparalleled Wonder and Forever had received the message from Yang Ying. Since there were guests in the room, Yang Ying couldn't poke his head in and greet them directly. Safety first. Forever? This person took the initiative to introduce himself. He then asked Yongyuan that they were all invited by Yongyuan. "I'm Forever." Forever hurried forward and introduced Unparalleled Wonder to him. He gave him Unparalleled Wonder's information. Safety first in Blossom City. He's the leader of a level 5 mercenary group. He's very popular in Blossom City. He's ranked 6th on the Thieves leaderboard. He's a powerful character. Hello. Safety first, he took the initiative to greet Matchless Hero. He seemed very easygoing, unlike Fei Tiantong who always put on airs. Unrivaled Genius also casually exchanged a few pleasantries, then led him to his seat and served him wine, just like how he treated Fei Tiantong. At this time, there were still a few minutes before the appointed time. The two groups of people had arrived early. After that, people arrived one after another. Some came alone like Safety First, while others brought 2 or 3 brothers like Fei Tiantong. There were even 2 who brought a woman. They came in lovey-dovey, but in the end, they were stared at by everyone in the room and hurriedly restrained themselves. Unrivaled Wonder treated everyone with the same attitude. 5 knights continued to pour tea and wine for everyone. His depression quickly escalated. Finally, all the players on Matchless Wonder Forever's list of 31 players had arrived. These people could be said to be influential figures in the main cities, but when they were introduced, they did not cause any commotion. After all, these 31 people came from different main cities. Although they were famous in their respective territories, they were not as famous as Qianli's drunk. Unrivaled Genius was satisfied to see all 31 people with different identities present. He once again raised his spirits and officially walked to the front desk. As for the purpose of their visit, most of the people present had already heard from Eternal. This gathering today was mostly a formality and a form of etiquette. Apart from that, he also wanted these 31 people to get to know each other. Everyone was going to Cloud City for the same mission. If they didn't know each other after fighting, it would be a joke if there was a conflict. At this time, Unrivaled Genius was at the front desk. He first gave a righteous speech. Needless to say, Ing-Chi was placed in the position of the victim, and the most overpowered one was the arrogant and despotic bully. Ing-Chi was bullied, but they were pitiful merchants. Even though they had invited the famous Eagle Group, they still couldn't stop the bullying of these bandits. Thus, the leader of the Eagle Group was chosen from the entire gaming world and found the 31 heroes sitting here. You guys are the game's guardians. The task of eradicating bullies and exterminating pests can only be entrusted to you. I hope that you guys can act on behalf of the heavens and uphold justice. Unrivaled Genius said a bunch of things in a daze. Half of the people below were starting to doze off. Unrivaled Genius quickly took out something that could wake them up: rewards. The half of the people who were dozing off immediately woke up. This was their purpose for coming here, to uphold justice or whatever. Who was the justice between the two sides was a complete mess. Everyone present was not a child. Just listening to a few words, they would really think that they could maintain world peace. Boss Guy. At this time, one of the 31 people finally spoke. There's no need to say too much. Just tell us, how much do we need to do? Exterminate, very OP. Unrivaled Genius said. Boss guy, this is an MRPG. There's no such thing as absolute extermination in the game. Another person said, using the boss guy name that the previous person had invented. Everyone, don't worry and kill boldly. Today, I've brought a few things. It's just a small greeting gift for everyone. I'm a businessman who runs a studio, and I'm particular about money and goods. The final reward that I'll give everyone won't be a fixed amount. It will be proportional to what you've given. I'm sure everyone understands what I'm saying. 5 knights, bring the things over to the bosses. Unrivaled Genius called out. 5 knights walked up and gave each of the 31 people 2 money bags. Seeing the color of the money bags, everyone's expression changed. This was a 10,000 gold bag. It could hold up to 10,000 gold. To Gu Fei and the others, 20,000 gold coins might not be a significant amount, but to an ordinary player, it was an astronomical sum that very few could afford. Gu Fei and the others always made hundreds of thousands or even millions. That was accumulated over time. Normal players didn't have this kind of opportunity to make money. 20,000 gold. Even though everyone here was an important figure, this number was enough to shock them. Moreover, the other party gave each of the 31 people 20,000, which was a total of 620,000 gold. 620,000 gold. These important figures had never heard of such an amount of gold before. Moreover, the currency system had just been updated, and gold was in short supply. In the final reward, the things that everyone wants will be included. Unrivaled Genius struck while the iron was hot and promised. But among the 31 players, one of them was the first to nod his head and put the 2 bags of gold coins on the table into his pocket. Following that, the rest of the players followed suit. Unrivaled Genius smiled when he saw the hesitant expressions of the remaining players. It seems like some of you are still worried. Do we need to sign an official contract? It's not impossible, but I think it's a little unnecessary, because I believe in everyone here. Unrivaled Genius's words were a reminder to the players. They were worried that Ing Chi wouldn't fulfill his promise, but on the other hand, wouldn't they just leave after taking the money? They were all trustworthy people, but so was Ing Chi. As the leader of the industry, not fulfilling his promise to the players would be destroying his own reputation. Once they realized this, none of the 31 people hesitated anymore. Everyone put away the money bags without hesitation. Thank you, everyone. Unrivaled Genius said, now, let's have Forever, the leader of the Eagle Group, introduce Very Overpowered to everyone. Let's have a better understanding of our opponent's strength. Very Overpowered? It seems to be a newly formed guild, right? What level is it? Someone among the 31 people asked. A guild's level was a good indicator of a guild's strength. Level 4. Forever stood up and answered the question. Pfft. Someone burst out in disbelief. Only level 4? After the end of the city war, the majority of the players only knew of this guild's name. They only knew that they were the defending side that won the city war. As for the exact structure of this guild, only the most gossipy people would know about it. None of the big shots present had the leisure to do so. That guild in a foreign land had nothing to do with them. Not bad, level 4. Forever nodded. What's their average level? Someone asked. This is still unknown. Forever said. Then what do you know? Very Overpowered's current numbers, according to our estimates, should be around 200. Only 200 people? Before Everlasting could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. His eyes were wide open. More than 200. Forever was already prepared for these people to make a fuss over nothing. The 31 people looked at each other in dismay. Every one of them had a powerful background and strength. To any one of them, a team of 200 or so players wasn't enough. However, to deal with these 200 or so players, the other side had actually sent 30 or so of them. Even if the other side had won the siege war by defending the city, they must have seized an opportunity. There was no way they could have defeated hundreds of thousands of players in a head-on battle. Just tell me what's so scary about this Very Overpowered? Someone asked. After all, they didn't think that England's boss was an idiot. To gather so many of them, Very overpowered, definitely had something up its sleeves. Qianli drunk. Forever said. Oh, I've heard of him. That melee mage. PvP madman. An idiot who only knows about bounty quests. His equipment isn't bad. Luckily his equipment is good. Otherwise, he'd be trash if he put all his points into agility. Does he really need so many of us to deal with him? Chu. Gu Fei, who was in Cloud City, couldn't help but sneeze. Chapter 882. Everyone, Qianli's drunk strength isn't as simple as you think it is. It took a lot of effort to stop these people from discussing Qianli's drunk. His heart was filled with emotion. From the beginning, he didn't look down on Qianli's drunk, but Qianli's strength had exceeded his expectations. His agility, reflexes, and combat techniques were on a completely different level from the average player. Because of this, the average player had no idea how powerful he was. His strength was beyond the scope of the average player's imagination. Oh, then what's so strong about him? Someone asked. I can't really describe it. I can only remind everyone to be careful of this person. He has the strength to destroy an entire guild by himself. Forever said. You're talking about the 1,000 kill during the city war, right? I heard about that. I've looked into it, and there was no 1,000 kill. Didn't Qianli's drunk add his agility points? At that time, he was running away, and that guild chased after him. They were a bit careless, and the team was too spread out, giving him an opportunity to take them down one by one. He didn't kill many people, just the agility classes that ran faster. After that, that guild was no longer spread out, and Qianli's drunk couldn't do anything to them. There's no such thing as 1,000 slaughter. One of the 31 people laughed. Anyway, everyone, don't be careless. Forever sighed. He knew he didn't need to worry about their carelessness. Matchless Hero didn't expect them to do much by inviting them. He just wanted to use them to pick out more troublesome opponents for Very Defiant. Matchless Hero wanted them to lose miserably. Apart from Qianli's drunk, is there anything else we need to be aware of? Someone else asked. Sword Demon, Drunkard, Yutian Shinming, Unscathed in Battle, Drifting, South Sword, Twilight in the Clouds. I'm sure everyone is familiar with these names, right? Forever said. Oh, they are all experts. Someone nodded. However, an expert is an expert. That was the game of the past. It's a brand new model now, so it's hard to say who's better. Moreover, even if he was an expert, how high could he be? With so many people working together, it's more than enough to deal with a few experts. Anything else? This time, he agreed with the other party's argument. Although the Sword Demon and the others were masters, they weren't abnormal masters like Qianli drunk. Even if they were stronger, they wouldn't be much stronger. That was, if you had 8 tails, I would have half a caddy. Now that I have 2.5 caddies, it would be 10 tails in total. Against your 8 tails, I would still have an extra 2 tails. Unlike that Qianli, who was drunk, he really didn't know how to measure his strength. Wasn't it a little too exaggerated to use a ton? Always imagining things. There's also the new group of players that Cloudy Summer brought in. They're all from Moonlit Night City's 10 Guilds Alliance. They're very tenacious and crazy when it comes to PvP. Their fighting style might be slightly different from the players you're used to seeing, Eternal said. And no matter how crazy they are, 200 strength can't become 400. One person replied. Everyone burst into laughter again. As they listened carefully along the way, they gradually felt that it was a bit exaggerated for In Chi to gather 31 of them in one go. Perhaps he was hoping that they would have the advantage of numbers and could defeat this heaven-defying person in one fell swoop with the force of a thunderbolt? Brother, always, if there's anything else, just say it all at once. That's it? Always said. Is that so? Then, everyone, let's put on a good show for our first time working together? The person who asked the question shouted at the other 30 people. No problem. Evidently, the other 30 people were very confident. But it's best if we get to know each other first. The person laughed and suggested. Everyone laughed. Come, everyone, open up your friends list and add each other as friends. The person said. the scene immediately became lively. It seemed like taking down the extremely overpowered person was not a difficult task for them. Yong Yong glanced at Matchless Hero, who nodded at him, indicating that this was enough. Always did not say anything else. However, he knew in his heart that if he were to sincerely warn these people about his heaven-defying strength, he would definitely say, "Be careful of the drunkard, the guy who is now called the young master of the Han clan." In terms of strength, even with Qianli's drunkard, the extremely overpowered person would still be at an absolute disadvantage. Therefore, it made no difference if he said anything about these experts. Only this sly and cunning person would be the most dangerous person in this situation where the extremely overpowered person could only win with his wits. Always did not say this, and he knew that he did not need to say it. After all, sending these people over meant that they would lose. The 31 of them made a ruckus in the tavern before returning to their homes to make preparations. The teleportation scrolls they used were all paid for by Ying Qi, but after this, Ying Qi did not say anything about going to Cloud City, so they would have to deal with it themselves. Most of the main cities were very far away from Cloud City, and it would take several days to walk there. If they used teleportation scrolls, one could only transport 4 people, and 10 of them could only transport 40 people. Although the game company had lifted the restriction on the trading of teleportation scrolls, it was still a considerable investment to rely on teleportation scrolls to fly over. These guys might not necessarily be willing to spend it. "I wonder how they'll get over there," Always said. He had suggested that Matchless Hero give a small gift at the beginning, but he would bear the cost of the teleportation scrolls, but Matchless Hero did not accept it. Hearing this, Matchless Hero brought up the matter again. "Do you know why I didn't agree to your suggestion? Real money is more attractive. With the money, they'll be able to solve the problem of walking by themselves," Always said. This was his opinion. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we don't have many teleportation scrolls left, and they're still very useful, Matchless Hero said. "Oh. Think about it, and you'll understand." Matchless Hero's smile was extremely sly. Always paused for a moment, and after thinking about it for a while, he suddenly understood. Giving money and promising better rewards had already moved these people. Since they had already agreed, how they would go was their own business, and there was no need to worry about it. The long journey might have restricted them. If they used teleportation scrolls, they wouldn't be willing to spend too much money. If they walked, some people might not be willing to travel such a long distance. As a result, there would be fewer people going, and the lower the number of people going, the higher the chance of failure. Defeat. This was exactly what Matchless Hero wanted this group of people to achieve. He had specifically chosen these people to seek revenge after they were defeated. They would seek help from their own guilds, their own teams, and their own friends. As a result, more and more people started looking for trouble, and Matchless Hero's goal was achieved. However, the use of teleportation scrolls, more people wanted to go to Cloud City, which was a very overpowered situation. Only then would the teleportation scrolls be useful. Thinking about it again, the other party also had to go, and Matchless didn't have any obligation to provide teleportation scrolls. Then the main use of the teleportation scrolls was to sell? After thinking about this, a question that had been bothering him for a long time suddenly floated up in his mind. Vaguely, he seemed to see some shadows. The 31 people returned to their respective cities and began to prepare. Afterwards, they contacted each other, and as expected, there was only one problem, the problem of the journey. The furthest among them was on the opposite side of Cloud City. The distance between the two cities was about 3 hours, and even if they didn't sleep, it would still take at least 2 days. If they were to calculate the time they spent online every day, it wouldn't be a problem to walk for 3 to 5 days. "This is too scary. I think it's better to get some teleportation scrolls and fly." In the game, players had to walk to level up, to do quests, to find people, and to do everything else. The lack of public transportation and rental cars had made the players very tired of walking. The low drop rate of teleportation scrolls meant that they weren't cheap, which caused the players to protest for a long time. Everyone begged the game company to make teleportation scrolls as cheap as the cheapest wine in a tavern, and to sell them to beggars on the streets. Teleportation scrolls aren't cheap right now, someone said. Due to the heaven-defying equipment toss event, scrolls were banned in the end due to a problem with mailboxes, so the business of teleportation scrolls didn't explode. However, before the game developers took action, scrolls were already being sold like crazy, and the prices had already risen. The event had just ended, and the prices had already fallen, but it wasn't going to happen so quickly. If we ask Matchless, can it be cheaper? Someone suggested. If he's willing to do it cheaper, he'll definitely take the initiative to mention it to us. He's purposely acting as if he's forgotten about it. It's better not to make it awkward. Of course, there were people who understood. Actually, the other party only has about 200 people. Even if we each bring 10 brothers over, we'll already be on par with them in terms of numbers. Do you mean to use scrolls? That scroll has 4 scrolls, that's at least 12. What's the use of 10? How much is a scroll now? Fuck, I just went to take a look, our auction house is offering 3,000. Fuck, will anyone buy it for 3,000? I still have 4 scrolls with me, help me sell them in your main city later. Walkerfly. How many people would fly if they flew? Everyone discussed these questions over and over again. This person asked that person asked that person, this person asked that person, this person asked that person, this person asked that person, and this person asked that person. In the end, everyone still had their own plans. Those who were willing to spend money had already begun to look for the cheapest scrolls to sell. Those who were unwilling had already begun to recruit brothers who were willing to go on a long journey with them. The extremely overpowered world-class crusade officially began its curtains. Butterfly Knot. A new round of bloodshed. Chapter 883. The crusade had spread across many major cities in the parallel world, but each major city only had one core member participating. In order to save money on travel expenses, no one was willing to bring too many people. After making their own plans, the 31 heroes finally set out on the road. Those who used scrolls, those who walked, those who had more people, those who had fewer people. Everyone agreed to form a team after arriving at Cloud Peak City so that they could have a common channel of communication. For those who wanted to use scrolls, obtaining scrolls was a more time-consuming matter. After that, flying to Cloud City didn't even take a minute. Before long, all the scroll-using players from number 31 middle school had arrived in Cloud City. After contacting each other, the party was already formed. The party leader was a player called Weathered Frost. He was a mage from Thousand Chasm City and was one of the core members of the Level 6 Guild, together in Wind and Rain. He was also a famous person on the Mage leaderboard. However, the reason why he was the party leader was because he was the first person to contact the others after arriving in Cloud City. So, he formed a party and invited others to join him. After this team was formed, everyone began to consider a very important problem. Everyone had come to Cloud City with the same goal in mind. In terms of total number of people, they exceeded very defying, but they were 31 groups of people from 31 main cities. Not to mention tacit understanding between each other, they weren't even familiar with each other. It seemed impossible to cultivate tacit understanding between each other, but at the very least, everyone should elect a person to be the unified commander. Otherwise, if they fought against very defying in a group battle, they might not be able to win even if they outnumbered him. As the top talents in the game, they understood this logic. But who should they nominate? That was too difficult. The 31 of them had only just met each other, so it was impossible to choose someone that everyone would be satisfied with. Randomly choose someone? But how could that be randomly chosen? I think the 31 of us should have no problem commanding a group battle, right? The people who had already arrived in Cloud City agreed on the coordinates to meet up while discussing this problem in the party channel. The 31 people who came weren't lone souls like apple vinegar. They all held important positions in a large party, and without the ability to command, they wouldn't be able to hold their positions. That's why it doesn't matter who it is, we just need a unified commander, another person said. Let's draw lots, someone suggested. Isn't this too casual? Whether it's drawing lots or something else, we'll have to wait for everyone to arrive. In short, there must be a commander-in-chief. Once he's selected, everyone will definitely listen to his commands. Everyone who's here now has no objections, right? No. Those who had already arrived expressed their opinions one after another. We have a total of 31 people, but only 7 of us have arrived, said a weather-beaten man. Stingy bastards, are you not willing to use the scrolls? Someone said disdainfully. How many people did you bring? Everyone began to ask each other about this information. 20 people. How about you? I only brought 16 people. I also have 20 people. Everyone reported their numbers. No matter how many there were, it was still a multiple of 4. One scroll was for 4 people after all. Any more and it would be a waste. While these 7 people were on their way to the rendezvous location, several more people arrived in Cloud City one after another. Weathered Frost had already told everyone that the team had been established, so those who arrived immediately contacted him to join the team. By the time the first 7 people gathered at the rendezvous location, a total of 18 people had already arrived in Cloud City, more than half of the 31 people. The other 13 Weathered Frost also confirmed the news. 7 of them had already decided to walk to Cloud City. They definitely wouldn't arrive today, and would probably arrive tomorrow morning. The other 6 people were still looking around for cheap teleportation scrolls. On the whole, most of them were willing to spend money on scrolls. As a result, everyone looked down on the 7 who refused to use the scrolls, both openly and secretly. We're at the rendezvous location XXX. Everyone come over first. Weathered Frost said in the team. Those who are using scrolls will probably arrive soon. Those 7 brothers who are coming on foot, should we wait for them? Someone asked in the channel. We'll talk about it later. The 7 people who arrived first waited at the rendezvous location. They weren't in the mood to appreciate the city scenery. Not long after, a familiar-looking person with a group of people appeared in their line of sight. It was obviously one of the 31 people. Hi, over here. Weathered Frost took the initiative to wave in greeting. He could recognize this person, but he couldn't remember his name. 31 people, how could he remember them in the blink of an eye? Brother Weathered Frost. Unexpectedly, the person who came called out his name immediately. Then he called out the names of the other 6 and greeted them one by one. It seemed like he remembered all of them. This made the weather-beaten man feel a little awkward, but he had to bite the bullet and said, brother, who are you again? This name doesn't seem to match. Come again, the other said with a smile. Oh. Weathered Frost immediately had an impression, and said a little embarrassedly, you have a good memory, everyone remembers. Once again he chuckled. After greeting him, Weathered Frost greeted the group of people that Come Again had brought with him. Everyone introduced themselves to each other, and it was very lively. At this moment, suddenly, someone gently pulled Weathered Frost from the side. Weathered Frost turned his head, and saw that it was one of the 7 people that had arrived first. What was his name again? He fucking forgot it again. Look over there. Weathered Frost gave a look in a certain direction. Weathered Frost looked in the direction that he was pointing at, and there stood a guy that seemed to have come from the same direction as Come Again's group. The person beside him continued to speak in a low voice. Can you see the guild emblem on his chest? Weathered Frost wasn't a marksman, and he couldn't see it clearly from such a distance. However, the person talking to him was a marksman. Weathered Frost heard his words and immediately reacted, is it very overpowered? It should be. The emblem has the word overpowered on it, and it's the same as Forever's description. The marksman said. Then, don't say it in the channel, or else he'll notice if everyone pays attention to it. Then he might be on guard against us. We're still in the dark, and if we catch them off guard, we can avoid a lot of losses. The marksman said. Brother, you're very meticulous. Weathered Frost praised. It's only right. The marksman said. What's your name? Weathered Frost asked. The marksman rolled his eyes. He had been introduced to them before. Wasn't this guy a little forgetful? How could he not remember so quickly? he had no choice but to say it again, Arrow's divine judgment.
Alright.
I'm sorry, Weathered Frost said. I say, Weathered Frost continued, it's good to be meticulous, but aren't you being a little too meticulous? Just because we all pay attention to him, he'll know that we're going to do something very overpowered? They should understand their situation by now, so they'll definitely be more sensitive, so it's better for us to be careful. Arrow's divine judgment said. But you see, Weathered Frost said, I think he's already noticed us? Arrow of the Divine Swordsman preached that he didn't want this suspicious person to notice his observation, so his eyes were always drifting. Every once in a while, he would glance in that direction, and when he spoke to Wind and Frost, he would look at him even more seriously. When he heard Weathered Frost's words, he immediately looked in that direction. His eagle eye, as a sharpshooter, could see more clearly than a man who had seen many trials and hardships. Was he not? The man was staring fixedly at them. Is he looking at us? Arrow's divine judgment was confused for a moment, but the person had already raised his hand and waved at them. Then he walked straight towards the two of them. Arrow's divine judgment and Weathered Frost looked at each other in dismay. As the person got closer, the others who were still chatting with each other began to notice him. The badge on his chest had the word, Defy. Everyone immediately made the same judgment as Arrow's divine judgment. He's an extremely overpowered person. While Arrow's divine judgment was still being careful, there were already people shouting in the team channel. There were even people who were about to pull out their weapons. Don't panic. Stop your people. Let's watch first. Weathered Frost immediately shouted in the team channel. Their team channel only had people of the same level as their boss. Everyone else couldn't reach the limit. News spread quickly. Those who were pulling out their weapons immediately stopped. Some stuffed their weapons back, while others kept their hands in their pockets, ready to pull them out at any time. At this time, the person had already walked up to them. He smiled and looked at Arrow's divine judgment and Weathered Frost. Brother, what's up? Weathered Frost spoke as if nothing had happened. Where did you guys come from? Asked the person. Weathered Frost exchanged glances with, you guys, and replied, we're not from the same place. Oh, so you're here in Cloud City to look for some overpowered trouble? Asked the person. What do you mean? Everyone's expression changed. The person only nodded, I'm waiting for you guys to PK. One person facing over 100 people and saying that he was waiting for them to PK was too shocking. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Then, they looked at this person's black robe and clearly identified this person's class. Everyone came to a realization. It's 1,000 miles drunk. This is that PK madman. Chinli drunk? Weathered Frost continued to speak for everyone. You seem to know that we're coming?
Yes.
You know who we are? I don't know. You can introduce yourself. I'm Weathered Frost. Weathered Frost really introduced himself. Then, everyone saw the legendary Chinli drunk take out a small notebook. After a while, he raised his head and said, yes, you have no PK value. What was this? Everyone was confused. Was there something wrong with Chinli drunk's head? In their team channel, the 8 big players who were already there were already negotiating. Those who weren't there yet heard that they had bumped into the overpowered Chinli drunk and immediately rushed over. Everyone was more or less curious about this legendary expert. Some people had already asked around in the channel, and the description of 1,000 miles drunk they received was inexplicable. This person was a little baffling, and his appearance was also a little baffling. More importantly, he inexplicably knew that they would come, and he seemed to know why they were here. He said it was a wild guess, but who would believe this answer? Although they didn't intend to completely conceal their identities during this operation, they had just arrived at Cloud Peak City, and they hadn't even gathered yet, but someone had already taken the initiative to look for them. Moreover, it seemed that they had been waiting for them for a long time. This was a little too abnormal. Did someone leak the information? Weathered Frost asked in the team channel. Now isn't the time to talk about this? Arrow Adjudicator said, Drunk Chinli drunk is still standing in front of you. That's right, 1,000 miles drunk was still standing in front of them. More than 100 of them were about to surround and attack him, but this person was still so calm and composed. He didn't even take a step back. What was that look in his eyes? Was it excitement? Was this person crazy? Let's do it. Someone couldn't hold back anymore. I'm wondering if this is a trap. Weathered Frost praised Arrow Adjudicator for being meticulous, but at this critical moment, he seemed to be even more meticulous than Arrow Adjudicator. What kind of trap? Someone asked. I don't know. But his appearance is too strange. Weathered Frost said. You've already asked this question. No matter what, he's in front of us now. He's made his intentions clear. Are we just going to leave without saying a word? Someone said. Let me do it. Weathered Frost said. You do it. Yes, I do it. Everyone wasn't familiar with each other. At this time, Weathered Frost took the initiative to challenge Qianli drunk. Even if he went to die, no one would be too concerned. So, no one stopped him. It was good to take this opportunity to see how strong Qianli drunk was. You're waiting for us to PK? Weathered Frost walked up and asked. Gu Fei nodded. I'm here. Weathered Frost said. A few more is fine, or all at once. I don't mind. I'm used to it. Gu Fei spoke very seriously. He hadn't experienced a 1v1 in a long time. He didn't even know when it was. If I'm going to die, there'll naturally be more people coming. Weathered Frost looked very confident. Gu Fei nodded, then waved his hand towards the crowd. Everyone make way. I don't want to get hurt. Everyone was instantly thrown into chaos. Wasn't it better for him to get hurt by accident? What did he mean by asking everyone to make way? Even though it was chaotic, everyone still made way. Even without Gu Fei's reminder, they would still make way. A battle between mages was the easiest way to get hurt. As the crowd scattered, Gu Fei had already unsheathed his sword. Night Streak Sword. The experienced person said this with a tone of admiration and envy. The Night Streak stats had long since been exposed on the website. Its magic damage and physical damage were the envy of all the classes. He's here. Gu Fei shouted in a low voice. Suddenly he disappeared from everyone's sight. The audience cried out. They could clearly see that the instant Qianli disappeared, he had already appeared behind Weathered Frost. His sword was already raised and he slashed down. Their cries of surprise seemed to come a bit slower than the sword. The continued. For the surprised audience, this was a bit too long. This was because everything had happened too quickly. After the first everyone immediately wanted to a second time. However, there was no time to rest, so they simply didn't stop the first and continued The reason why everyone wanted to continue was because when Qianli's sword slashed down, Weathered Frost suddenly disappeared. The way he disappeared was exactly the same as Qianli's. He disappeared from here, came out from there, and appeared behind drunken Qianli. It was also teleportation. Both of them teleported. Everything happened in the short span of a second. It was a high-tempo game. The audience had been surprised twice, so they could only mix it up. Everyone in the world knew that Qianli could teleport when he was drunk. However, he definitely didn't expect that the mage he was fighting, Weathered Frost, could do the same. So, he was going to lose this time. That was what everyone thought, but no one expected Qianli to react so quickly and make such an accurate judgment. Weathered Frost flashed behind him. Qianli couldn't retract his sword in time, but his left arm had already swung behind him. Everyone seemed to hear a bang. Weathered Frost staggered, his hand covering his nose as he took a few steps back. His nose was sore and his hand was wet. He put down his hand and saw that he hadn't lost much health, but his nose was bleeding. Both of his nostrils were flowing. You can teleport too. Qianli turned around at this time and spoke to him. He wasn't in a hurry to chase after him. Weathered Frost hurriedly nodded while looking for a piece of tissue to plug his nostrils. If he didn't, the blood would flow into his mouth. You're also an electric mage, Qianli said. Weathered Frost's hand trembled and he almost stuffed the tissue into his mouth. This Qianli was drunk and only knew that he was an electric mage. Could it be that he didn't appraise himself before PK? Weathered Frost thought as he cleaned up. Qianli didn't take advantage of this time to make a move. The surrounding audience was silent. But if it's teleportation, that kind of movement. You didn't look at the target. How did you do it? Gu Fei asked in confusion. Weathered Frost wiped the blood from his nose as he replied, "You can't? Then your proficiency is too low." Gu Fei suddenly understood. He had to admit this. Although he intentionally used teleportation frequently, this skill had a relatively long cooldown. Even if Gu Fei used it as soon as the cooldown was up, with his time online, he wouldn't be able to use it much in a day. Compared to those dedicated players who played for more than 10 hours a day, Gu Fei believed that his proficiency for this skill wasn't high. "Are you done?" Gu Fei asked. "I'm done." The blood couldn't be stopped quickly. Weathered Frost could only leave 2 tissues in his nostrils. It was a comical sight. But at this time, he had already pulled out his staff. "Coming!" Gu Fei raised his sword and charged forward. At the same time, he raised his staff and shouted, "Lightning Array!" Chapter 884. Lightning spells were known for their speed. This spell, which was well versed in wind and frost, was ostentatious and imposing. After chanting, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the blink of an eye. Streaks of pale blue lightning descended from the sky. Their height was about the same as the heavenly fire wheel, but the speed of their descent was on a completely different level. By the time he finished chanting, the lightning had already struck the ground. In terms of sound effects, these 2 spells were also very different. The heavenly fire wheel roared and struck in one go, but this lightning spell was like popping beans. It was obviously not an attack like the heavenly fire wheel that could be finished in 1 round. Since learning this spell, experience of wind and frost had never failed before. This spell was a combination of field control and attack. The person being bombarded wouldn't be instantly killed, but they would be trapped in the spell and unable to move. At this time, if other spells were thrown, the opponent would naturally die. Experience of wind and frost had this confidence, which was why he said that he wanted to fight with Qianli in a one-on-one battle. However, Qianli could teleport, and this skill could easily jump out of the range of the lightning spell. Experience of wind and frost had originally thought of a lot of plans to trick Qianli into using this skill, but who would have thought that he would use it on his own initiative? This was because Qianli's way of using Drunk's teleportation was very different from a real mage like him. How could a normal mage use teleportation to get close? It was more likely to use this spell to escape and maintain distance. Gu Fei's attack was considered sudden. If experience of wind and frost hadn't also used teleportation and was familiar with it, he would have definitely been cut down. At that time, he had already flashed behind Gu Fei and wanted to use the tactic that Gu Fei had prepared to use to attack Gu Fei. Who would have thought that the opponent's reaction would be so fast? Before he could even make a move, the opponent's elbow had already knocked out a nosebleed. The PK between the 2 mages was actually so rough that even their HP was spurting out. This was the first time in experience of wind and frost's life. Fortunately, the other party did not continue to pursue him. Instead, he chatted with him. Once they were done cleaning up, the 2 of them attacked again, and immediately used his killer move without hesitation. The Thunder Light Array was activated, and the lightning within the array was dazzling. Gu Fei had long been engulfed by the lightning, and could not be seen from the outside of the array. However, the experienced Frost knew in his heart that although his skill's formation was powerful, the damage was not that exaggerated. It did not have the ability to kill his opponent instantly. Using the formation to control his opponent's movements, and then quickly followed up with other spells, would he be able to truly defeat his opponent? Because of this, other people didn't know about Gu Fei's current situation, but those who had experienced the hardships of life knew that he was definitely not dead. Moreover, he had already remembered where Gu Fei was standing, so he didn't dare to be negligent and threw a bunch of spells in that direction. He was already very familiar with this technique, and the other mages around him were all very impressed. If a mage wanted to cast spells quickly, they had to speak clearly and speak quickly. Experience of Wind and Frost's speaking speed made all the mages present feel ashamed of their inferiority. This skill couldn't be strengthened by equipment, scrolls, or anything else. It all depended on one's mouth. After casting all the spells, such as the Flaming Tree, Fire Wheel, Fireball, Lightning, and so on, he let out a long sigh. There might still be people who could survive in such a situation, but Experience of Wind and Frost believed that it wouldn't be Qianli drunk, because he had already appraised Qianli drunk. His equipment was a mess, and he didn't have any powerful magic defense equipment, so how could he resist the random bombardment of so many spells? Moreover, this guy was a mage who focused on agility and didn't add any intelligence or spirit, so his magic defense was even worse than in ordinary mages. Experience of Wind and Frost was full of confidence. At this time, he let out a long sigh and turned his head, wanting to show everyone a victorious smile. Who would have thought that just as he turned his head, he would see everyone's astonished gazes staring behind him? Experience of Wind and Frost was startled and promptly turned his head, only to see Qianli drunk's black silhouette already shrouding him, that dark purple longsword slashing down. Experience of Wind and Frost didn't feel any pain, and at this time, his mind wasn't even on his own life or death. He just couldn't understand, how could Qianli drunk not die? The flames of fire spells were already ignited in the array. It was clear that Qianli drunk had rushed out of the lightning array before these spells could be cast. This kind of situation. It wasn't that Experience of Wind and Frost hadn't encountered this kind of situation before, but at that time, his opponent had come prepared and was wearing lightning resistance equipment, which allowed him to withstand the damage of the lightning array. The lightning array couldn't instantly kill a person, but if you randomly moved around in the array, you would be hit by lightning multiple times, which was equivalent to receiving multiple attacks, and definitely wouldn't be able to survive. Experience of Wind and Frost's equipment had long since been appraised, and the lightning array activated very quickly. It was impossible for someone to completely change their equipment in an instant. Moreover, Qianli drunk clearly hadn't changed his equipment, and his black robe was still the same black robe, so how could he not die and rush out? Experience of Wind and Frost's mind wasn't on PvP, but as one of the top mages in the world, his equipment wasn't bad either. Gu Fei's dual flame flash wasn't able to instantly kill him. However, following up with a hook kick, Experience of Wind and Frost didn't react at all, and was immediately hooked to the ground. With how professional Gu Fei was, he immediately sensed that there was something wrong with his opponent. It was natural that he was fast, and even if his opponent saw this hook kick, he definitely wouldn't be able to dodge it. However, his opponent's gaze wasn't something that a person in battle should have. It was as if he had lost his soul and didn't know what he was looking at. At this time, he had already fallen to the ground, as if he didn't know his own situation. Towards this guy who dared to fight him one-on-one, Gu Fei still admired his courage, so he immediately stopped and didn't immediately kill him. Looking at Experience of Wind and Frost lying on the ground, he asked, "What's wrong? How did you get out?" Experience of Wind and Frost was desperately struggling with this question. "I ran out," Gu Fei said. "Of course I know, I'm asking you how you ran out. How much health do you have? How much magic defense do you have? Your clothes, your rings? Do you have a passive lightning resistance skill?" Experience of Wind and Frost said all of his suspicions in one go. With high health and high magic defense, it was possible to survive, and Gu Fei's robe and 2 rings didn't show any attributes when Experience of Wind and Frost appraised them. Perhaps there was something special about them, and some skill that strengthened defense was also very likely. These were all deductions made from the perspective of a professional gamer, so for a non-professional gamer like Gu Fei, he was instantly at a loss. "What did you say? You rushed out of the lightning formation and didn't die? How did you do it?" Experience of Wind and Frost asked. "If I didn't get hit by the lightning, of course I wouldn't die. What's so strange about that?" Gu Fei asked back. "Didn't get hit by the lightning? How is that possible?" Experience of Wind and Frost's shock increased again. This answer was even more difficult to accept than if his opponent had used some equipment or skill that he had never heard of. Why not? It's not like there isn't a gap between each lightning attack. If you looked carefully, then of course you wouldn't get hit. Gu Fei said. Is there a gap between the lightning? You're asking me about your own skill? Experience of wind and frost almost spat out blood. The other players were also dumbfounded. They had all seen the power of the lightning array. How could they find a gap between the lightning bolts and get out? What kind of eyesight was that? Even if he could find it, this should be something that could only be done carefully, right? This guy was actually able to escape in the blink of an eye? How was that possible? Bullshit, this was definitely bullshit. Hurry up and stand up. Be serious and finish the fight. Gu Fei said to Experience of Wind and Frost. Experience of Wind and Frost stood up and suddenly teleported into the crowd. He then announced, "Okay, my duel with you is over." Experience of Wind and Frost came to Cloud City to earn what he wanted, not to die and lose levels. Right now, his most confident trick had already been broken by Qianli's drunk. Moreover, Qianli's attack was so fast that he didn't know how to dodge it. That damage caused Experience of Wind and Frost, who had just been hit by a dual flame flash, to come back to his senses. His heart immediately sped up. That barbaric attack. Experience of Wind and Frost took out the paper ball from his nose. His nose immediately started bleeding again. I'm not going to fight anymore. No matter what, I can't fight anymore. You bastard, you're a mess. Gu Fei shook his head and frowned. I should be the one talking about you. Sneak out of the lightning light array? How could there be such a thing? Are you cheating? Experience of Wind and Frost retorted. As for Gu Fei's explanation, he still couldn't accept it. He felt that this was at most something that existed in theory. It was impossible for it to actually happen. It was like someone explaining that there was nothing wrong with going south or north because the earth was round. Therefore, going north or south was the same. This was just being unreasonable. At this moment, Gu Fei, who had experienced many hardships, felt that Gu Fei was being unreasonable. He felt that Gu Fei was trying to cover up by making up such a reason. He must have some other magical method that was inconvenient to expose. Sigh. Gu Fei shook his head and sighed. It was really difficult to talk to these people who didn't understand the inner meaning of things. Is there anyone else who wants to duel? Gu Fei was too lazy to waste his saliva with Experience of Wind and Frost. The rest of the people looked at each other. After witnessing Qianli's strange strength, no one wanted to test his strength anymore. At this time, they were discussing whether or not to fight again. 1,000 Miles Drunk had foreseen their goal and foreseen their arrival, but this strange question had yet to be answered. At this time, someone had already expressed his opinion. Qianli was prepared, which meant that they were extremely heaven-defying. Was it Qianli who came alone? Or were the extremely heaven-defying people already nearby? If it was just Qianli alone, there was no need to be afraid of more than 100 of us. But what if the extremely heaven-defying people were all here? Everyone agreed with this. If the other party was prepared, how could they only come alone? There must have been some terrifying traps set up in the surroundings. This Qianli was only the first step in their trap. As for what the plot was, they couldn't see through it. This was what was worth having a headache about. Tell those who haven't arrived to hurry up. If everyone is here, even if the extremely heaven-defying people are prepared, there's no need to be afraid. We have the advantage in numbers. A few big shots gathered together to discuss. That's too hasty. I think we should let them not get too close first. That way, if anything happens, we can coordinate from the inside and outside, another person said. That's safer. Another person nodded. But I really can't see any ambush around here. Jian Dingtian stared at his left and right with his pair of eagle eyes. I'm not familiar with the geography. Who knows if there's a pit or a hole around here? Another person said. There are pits and holes in your main city? Another person was surprised. Yes. That person said. Which city are you from? Waterclaw City. Is it the city called Vegetable Garden City? I have friends over there. Is that so? What's their name? Hey, you too. They collectively despised those who went off-topic. The two big shots who went off-topic were ashamed. The brother who went through the hole in Vegetable Garden City returned to the main topic. That's why we can't easily conclude that there's no ambush. For example, that house over there. What if it's an extremely heaven-defying property? This kind of ambush can be done in any main city, right? Everyone hurriedly nodded in agreement. Is there anyone else who wants to fight one-on-one? Gu Fei shouted again. Look, he's getting impatient. He's impatient for us to fall into a trap, right? How about we ignore him and leave him hanging? Isn't that too childish? Don't tell me he dares to take the initiative to attack over 100 of us? According to Eternal, he really dares. Then why hasn't he made a move yet? Is there anyone else who wants to fight one-on-one? Gu Fei shouted for the third time, answering the question that the big shots were wondering about. Could it be he's seriously asking this question? The big shots all felt that it was inconceivable. This drunk Qianli didn't seem to have the same way of thinking as them. Where did this person come from? At this moment, Weathered Frost continued to speak on behalf of everyone to drunk Qianli. I think we should forget about fighting one-on-one. Where are your extremely heaven-defying friends? You can't be the only one here, right? Ask them all to come out and meet us. I'm the only one here. Gu Fei said. Everyone laughed. This person was really simple. Directly denying it like this was too obvious. It seemed like there really were other people around. Extremely heaven-defying friends, come out. We know you guys are here. Since we know each other's intentions, let's fight to our heart's content. Weathered Frost said in a clear voice. What's wrong with you? Didn't I say that I'm the only one here? While everyone felt that Gu Fei was a complete mess, Gu Fei also felt that this Weathered Frost was sick in the head. Then where are the others? Weathered Frost couldn't help but ask. You guys aren't the only ones here. The others are obviously going to greet your other friends. Gu Fei said. What? Why didn't you say so earlier? Weathered Frost's face paled in fright. He hurriedly sent a message to tell the others that hadn't arrived yet to be on the lookout for an ambush. In the end, he saw Gu Fei look at him as if he was an idiot. Are you an idiot? I already said it. If you guys know our people are here, how are you going to ambush them? As soon as he finished speaking, Weathered Frost had only written half of his message when an important character who hadn't arrived yet shouted in the team channel. Fuck, it's an ambush. An ambush. Chapter 885. What's going on? What's going on? The 8 of them, who had been through thick and thin, shouted in the team channel, but there was no reply. In the game, no reply didn't mean that the person was dead. On the contrary, no reply meant that the person was still alive and full of energy. It was precisely because they wanted to live that they didn't have time to send messages. The 8 of them were nervous. They came from different places, so their numbers were incredible. However, once they split up, there were only about 20 people in each group. That wasn't enough. Who would have thought that they would be targeted as soon as they teleported to the Cloud City? The 8 of them were nervous, but at the same time, they were glad that they had arrived early enough to regroup before the enemy ambushed them. What's wrong? What happened? Someone suddenly spoke in the party channel. His name was Floral Shawl. The person who could speak in the party channel was obviously one of the 31 of them. He had been through many hardships and had a forgetful personality. He didn't know who this person was, but when he tried again, he immediately replied, Some of my friends who came over were ambushed. How are you? I'm fine. I'm coming over. Are you guys all right? Floral Shawl asked. A few more people spoke after Floral Shawl. They were all people who hadn't encountered any trouble and were rushing over. We only have one Qianli drunk, no. The person who sent the message didn't even have time to finish typing before he couldn't continue. Gu Fei, who had asked 3 times in a row if anyone wanted to challenge him to a duel, naturally wouldn't continue asking after 3 times. At this moment, he had already made his move without any hesitation. An area of effect spell was thrown at the place where the players were the most densely packed. Apart from the 8 VIPs, the other players weren't weaklings either. They were all elites of their respective cities. Although they were surprised by Gu Fei's spell, they all dodged it. Fuck, this guy really dares to make a move. Sword Adjudicator yelled as he knocked an arrow and fired it at Gu Fei. Gu Fei dodged to the side and used teleportation to fly into the crowd. Slashing left and right, he immediately began a massacre. Take him down. The big shots were clearly still somewhat confused about Gu Fei's strength. When they saw Gu Fei's actions, they felt that he was courting death. They were outnumbered, and instead of keeping their distance, they actually jumped into the crowd. Even if they were fighting monsters, they wouldn't do something so idiotic. The elites bravely stepped forward, wanting to take down Gu Fei, but in an instant, 4 of them had already turned into white light. The priests behind them were stunned. They didn't even have a chance to recover. The damage was too high. 1 slash would kill him. Those with low HP, don't go up, someone shouted. This person was one of the 8 players. His ID was first-class hypothermia, and he was an expert cleric. He could tell at a glance that Qianli's Drunken had specifically targeted the classes with low health. Those with high health were just a casual crowd control attack, so they weren't his main target. This guy seems to be a bit of a mess, but in terms of combat, he's meticulous to every step. Just who is he? First-class hypothermia thought to himself as he waved his hand to command the other clerics to heal. Gu Fei quickly killed a few of those with low health. The other clerics were so surprised that they thought their existence was meaningless. In fact, for classes with high health like warriors, Gu Fei's attacks could also take care of them. It was just that he couldn't insta-kill them. If these clerics only focused on the ones who were insta-killed and ignored the warriors, then the warriors would also be in trouble. First-class hypothermia, who was experienced, saw this point. Being a cleric in the parallel world was actually very difficult. It required a lot of concentration. Although they had some support from the system, most of the time, they still had to rely on their own eyes to make decisions. When Gu Fei broke into the enemy's formation, the opponents were a bit confused for a moment, but they were moving in an orderly manner. The archers and mages naturally retreated to the periphery, while the warriors and paladins supported each other to prepare for a pincer attack. The thieves all went into stealth, waiting for an opportunity to move. Everything was in order. Everyone thought that the situation would soon be under control, but no one expected that their nightmare had only just begun. They set up their formation, they moved, they wanted to pincer Qianli's Drunken, but the result was that Qianli's movements were always faster than theirs. Qianli's Drunken, who weaved through more than 100 people, moved erratically, and they couldn't catch him at all. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed what kind of movement this was. It was a completely unthinking movement, but every step seemed to be made after careful thought. He either dodged an attack, escaped a pincer attack, or stepped into the perfect position to attack. The elites couldn't predict or judge, they could only chase after Qianli's Drunken footsteps. The result? The slow ones couldn't keep up with his pace, and the fast ones, when they caught up, were killed with a turn of his body. The priests were all recovering like crazy, because they couldn't catch the gap between Qianli's attacks at all. They could only keep farming like this with their lives on the line. If they could get to the right spot, they would be saved. If they couldn't, white light? The eyes of the 8 VIPs gradually showed fear. They were more and more convinced. Killing 1,000 people, this might be an exaggeration, but killing 100 people didn't seem difficult for Qianli's Drunken. They were experts, but in front of Qianli's Drunken, experts like them were completely useless, because their strength wasn't on the same level at all. It was like a group of rabbits facing a tiger. It didn't matter if you were a white rabbit, a black rabbit, a strong rabbit, or a speed rabbit. In front of the tiger, you were just a rabbit, and a slap from the tiger would turn you into a rabbit pancake. Strength? They weren't on the same level, so what was there to talk about strength? It was more like telling a joke. Stop, 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 don't chase. They knew that the current situation had already been brought into Qianli's rhythm by Drunken. If this continued, it would become an endless cycle until all of them were wiped out. Maintain the formation, don't scatter, don't chase, use silence. The priests, low temperature, also shouted loudly. They hadn't had the time to discuss who would be the commander. At this moment, whoever had an idea would immediately shout it out, so there was no time to discuss. However, Low Temperature's instruction was also in line with everyone's wishes. The other 7 VIPs didn't have any objections, and they also knew that they couldn't have any objections at this time. The 100 or so people hurriedly followed this instruction, no longer attempting to kill Qianli's drunken. They each went their own way, wanting to first firmly form an offensive and defensive formation. But at this moment, their 100 or so people came from 8 different cities, and the drawbacks of different guilds were revealed. Although in terms of class composition, their ratio was perfect, the habits of players from different cities and teams were different. They used their own understanding of the way to proceed, and these 100 or so people actually couldn't form an ideal formation in a short period of time. For a moment, it actually seemed a little disorderly. Low Temperature commanded loudly, but other than the people he brought with him who quickly understood, the others were more or less at a loss. Some couldn't even understand the words Low Temperature used to command. What was even more frightening was that Qianli's drunken didn't let go of this flaw. This frightening enemy was no longer the same as when he fought drunken, chatting, wiping nosebleeds, and caring about people asking what's wrong. His swift footsteps seemed to have countless incarnations, and for a moment, he was unable to coordinate with the rest of the team. Low Temperature, who was the loudest in command, was almost killed by him. Fortunately, he was a priest with thick skin, and Gu Fei couldn't defeat him no matter how many times he used his sword. In the end, he had no choice but to leave. Moving without stopping for a moment. This was the most important point for Gu Fei when he was outnumbered. Wasting so much time in Low Temperature was already a very dangerous thing. If he was careless and really got surrounded and killed, Gu Fei also didn't have a good way to escape. So he needed to constantly move, so that the opponent would never be able to catch his position. The expressions of the 8 VIPs became more and more unsightly. As Gu Fei moved around, their numbers constantly decreased. At this time, they had already lost more than 20 people. Low Temperature commanded for a long time, but there wasn't much of an improvement. His loud voice even attracted Qianli's attention, and he almost killed himself. What kind of situation is this? The 8 people were speechless. Just as the situation was getting out of hand, they suddenly saw Qianli stuff his drunken sword into his pocket, and with a flash of white light, he disappeared with a whoosh. The elites didn't have time to react. They were still nervously looking left and right, afraid that the black figure would suddenly step in front of them. Actually, how hard could it be for 100 people to stand in a group? The key was that while everyone was not very coordinated, there was also Gu Fei causing trouble in the middle. One moment he would rush here and slash, the next moment he would run there and kill. Just as the people stood in a formation, they would scatter after dodging his attacks. When they turned around and gathered again, Qianli would kill in a circle and then turn back. With this kind of repetition, how could he command Low Temperature? Gu Fei was only controlling his own rhythm, but he had to control the rhythm of 100 people at the same time. The difficulty in itself was even greater. At this time, Gu Fei had already disappeared. Those who had come back to their senses were stunned, and those who hadn't came back to their senses were still carefully moving. When they realized that the other party didn't come out to stop them, they were all ecstatic. But when they looked around, they realized that the other party had just left. Why did he suddenly leave? The 8 VIPs were confused. It might be a trap again. Everyone, get into position. Low Temperature could finally command everyone when no one was causing trouble, and it was very precious. How's everyone's losses? The experienced one asked. I have 4. I have 3 on my side. Fuck, I lost 5. My people are okay, only 2 died. Everyone reported their losses. After hearing that, the experienced one looked at his own side and was instantly speechless. What's wrong? The others asked him about his abnormality. No wonder he left. The experienced one said, What's wrong? We lost a total of 29 people. The experienced one said, Chapter 886. 29 people died, so he left. Only players who didn't come into contact with PK wouldn't be able to understand such a cause and effect relationship. Of course, the big shots at the scene weren't such pure players. For a moment, they were all speechless. So he went to clear his PK points. If he was done, was he going to come back and continue to deal with them? What was even more tragic was that the people who died went straight back to their hometowns. After arriving in Cloud City, they weren't in a hurry to register. They all wanted to meet up first before doing anything else. They didn't expect it to be like this. Let's leave here first. We can't wait here any longer. We should take the initiative to meet up with the others. After all, we're the one with the most fighting power right now. Hypothermia said. We're the one with the most fighting power? After being beaten so badly by Qianli's one drink, why did these words sound so ironic? You guys know what I mean. Hypothermia said helplessly. What he meant was, of course, that compared to the others, they were a team of at least 8 people. Naturally, they were the team with the most combat power. Yet, these guys insisted on thinking about the awkward battle just now. Weren't they ashamed? You're right. Let's go. Weathered Frost agreed with Hypothermia. He asked for the others' location in the channel, indicating that he would take the initiative to meet up with them. What about the other bosses? Are they okay? Is there anyone who can say something? Weathered Frost continued to shout in the channel. There were still a few big shots who still hadn't heard from them. The battle seemed to be in a stalemate. Everyone was helpless. Suddenly, a system notification rang. A player was judged to have left the maximum range of the team and automatically left the team. Everyone's heart tightened. Now that he had left the largest range of the team, it could only mean that the boss was dead, and the people he was with would most likely end up in a miserable state. As expected, everyone quickly received a private message from this boss. 3 words, fuck fuck fuck. What's going on? Everyone finally found someone to ask. Motherfucker, some very overpowered people already knew we were coming. Our main path was cut off. They have a lot of people. The boss's anger could not be quelled in a short period of time. At their level, their rankings on the level rankings were very important. When they went out and announced their ranking, hearing that it was in the double digits was already a great deal of face. Being in the top 10 or even the top 20 was even more so. When people introduced them, they would hang their names in front of them like a title. But now that he was dead, he had lost the chance to be called that. In the domain of 40+1, it was impossible to catch up to the previous ranking after dropping a level, unless there was a huge change in luck. Which of the top players in the world wasn't a leveling maniac? Therefore, in terms of diligence, no one would lose to anyone else. Hard work alone could not make up for this kind of loss. I wonder how the other teams are doing. The 8 of them were not in the mood to share their current feelings with this brother. Since they were not familiar with each other, they were more worried about the other teams that were in the same situation as him. They had already realized how terrifying their opponents were, so they were very concerned about how much strength they had right now. They no longer thought that they could defeat a heaven-defying expert with just a few people, nor did they think that it was an exaggeration for In-Chi to gather experts from 31 main cities. How could they be experts? In front of Qianli's drunken, they were all rabbits. One person could torment you more than 100 times. It turned out that legendary things weren't completely legendary. They looked like legends because those things didn't hit the mark. The strength of Qianli's drunken couldn't be described with words. This wasn't fucking within the scope of a player at all. The 8 VIPs were currently worried for the other teams, but they were also discussing Qianli's drunken. Qianli's drunken was going to clear his PK points. After he was done, he could come back to kill them at any time. If they didn't hurry up and gather 300 to 500 people, they wouldn't feel safe at all. However, the development of the situation was not going in the direction they had hoped for. Soon after, the team received a system notification that someone had left the range and left the team. This was followed by an angry message that said, "Fuck, fuck." They didn't want to see this result, but they were already mentally prepared. The other side was so well prepared, how could they fight a battle that they had no confidence in? If they could wipe out one team, they could naturally wipe out 2 or 3 teams. The teams that were ambushed probably couldn't escape. The strength of each team was already about the same. It wasn't until another person left the party on his own that he finally realized that the people who were still in the party were all talking in the channel. The people who were ambushed were all wiped out, a total of 6 teams. They had just arrived at Cloud City and they had already lost 1/5 of their strength. This didn't include the 29 people that were sent back to their hometown by Qianli's drunken. Of the 18 armies that arrived first, 8 met, 6 were wiped out, and the remaining 4 were nervously meeting up. Fortunately, there were no new accidents. The 8th Route Army and the 4th Route Army met up smoothly and formed the new 12th Route Army. There were a total of 211 people. This was a number that defied the natural order of things, not to mention that Qianli's drunken was equivalent to X number of people. After the meeting, the big shots still couldn't find the sense of security they were looking for. They hurriedly contacted the 6 teams that were still slowly looking for scrolls and told them everything that had happened here. They told them to be careful and that it would be best if they could tell them the coordinates of the teleportation point. The 200 of them would go directly to meet up. Then, they contacted the brothers from the 6 teams that were killed and sent back to their hometown to inquire about their news. At this time, the 6 angry brothers were planning to gather more people, preparing to return to Cloud City to take revenge. This decision made the big shots of the 12 teams extremely happy. They couldn't wait for the 6 heartbroken people to move all of their guilds and directly unite to form an army of 10,000 people. If that was the case, Qianli shouldn't be so scary after getting drunk, right? In addition to these comrades, the 7 brothers who were still trekking through the mountains and rivers also had to be contacted. The severity of the situation had already been reflected to the 7 comrades, and the problem they needed to realize was that it was impossible for them to sit down and drink tea while waiting for them, because they had already taken the initiative to target them, and they were currently at a disadvantage. If you continue to dawdle, it is very likely that when you arrive, we will already be gone. You will have to face very overpowered alone. Sandpaper said, "Can't you guys go offline and hide first?" This person was determined to go to Cloud City. The 12 big shots of the 12 teams looked at this brother with disdain. Go offline and hide? This was a good idea, but they still had things to do. The 6 scrolls were still waiting for them to pick them up. If they were to hide, what would happen if they got taken down by very overpowered? They did not discuss this matter with the Sandpaper comrade, because they thought that the Sandpaper comrade would only coldly say, "Then can't they wait before flying?" Just because of you, Boss Sandpaper's team, everyone had to go offline and wait for you to come back? Everyone was indignant, and they hated his attitude. Looking at the other 6 teams, they had already expressed that they would use their scrolls to fly over as soon as they arrived at the next main city. Ignore that guy. There's a brother here who already got the scrolls and is going to get them. Let's go pick him up at the coordinates he wants to go to, Sandpaper said to everyone. Everyone nodded and quickly went to the coordinates. Along the way, the 200 people were very restrained and no longer had the arrogant attitude they had when they first arrived. Although 4 of the teams didn't fight with Qianli and didn't get ambushed, they didn't dare to be careless after hearing the battle report and seeing how cautious the 8 teams were. On the streets where the 6 teams were ambushing, very overpowered players were taking inventory of the battlefield. All 6 teams had been completely wiped out. The probability of such a large number of deaths to not drop anything was too low. The items that dropped were distributed according to the game's common method, exchange for money. If the people present needed money, they would fork out the money and everyone would split it. If they didn't have enough money, they could pay in installments. Those who suffered losses in battle would receive more money as compensation. However, dying in a parallel world would directly cause one to lose a level. The losses were unprecedented, so it was difficult to determine how much compensation was appropriate. However, very overpowered players didn't need to worry about this because they didn't suffer any casualties from the 6 teams. Their advantage in numbers was one thing, but more importantly, their attacks caught their opponents off guard. The first wave of attacks had already wiped out half of their opponents. Although the very overpowered players weren't elites, they were led by a group of top experts. In terms of commanding, Yutian Shenming and Unscathed in battle looked like a mess, but they were actually experienced players. They weren't any weaker than any other expert. They just weren't as eye-catching as some of the experts who specialized in this area. What about yours? I don't have anything good here. They had only taken care of around 20 or so players, and some places had no harvest at all. Imperial Divine Cry had dropped 3 pieces of equipment along the way, but none of them were top-tier items that could make anyone drool. To the players who had just received a generous compensation, these items were nothing in their eyes. Nothing. Unscathed in battle didn't drop anything at all. A bunch of paupers. Yutian Shenming cursed. Although the other side also had 20 people, they couldn't compare to the Eagle Party at all. Out of the 31 people, only the leader was comparable to the members of the Eagle Party. The others were his companions in the independent guilds or mercenary groups. Not every main city had a group of the best gathered together to play. From the looks of it, the other side has around 20 people. The largest is 24, and the smallest is 16. Qinli, how are things going on your side? I'm clearing PKs. Busy. Gu Fei said. Everyone fell silent. If Gu Fei was clearing PKs, then he must have killed around 29 people. Everyone knew this without even asking. This guy's efficiency was much higher than everyone else's, and he was facing a whole group of them. As expected, it was Qinli. He was the best. How many teams do you think the other side has? If there are 20 people in a team, brother, you said. There should be at least 100 people. Gu Fei said. Be more precise. Brother, you said. I saw 7 or 8 of them huddled together and whispered to each other. They might be the leader. Gu Fei's observation skills couldn't be ignored. Oh, then that's 7 or 8 teams. Including these 6 teams, there are already 13 or 14 teams. There are still some that we don't know. It looks like more than 20 teams shouldn't be a problem. Brother, you finished counting. 20 teams, 20 people in a team? 400 people, TSK. It's a pity that more than 100 people went back. I don't think the rest will be far behind. Yutian Shenming said. 20 teams is just an estimate. I think there are more possibilities. This time, it's all thanks to Yun Ting's information that we were able to get the upper hand. Brother, you said. Don't say that. Han family young master said, this isn't information leaked by Yun Ting. It's just a small matter that I accidentally learned of while chatting with a friend. Then, through my great wisdom, I came to this conclusion. Come on, he obviously leaked it to you on purpose. Yutian Shenming said. Han family young master didn't answer. In fact, how could he not know that Yun Ting had intentionally revealed this to him? However, there was a subtle tacit understanding between him and Nitrite. Nothing would directly point to the other party's goal. It was as if it was just a small topic in a casual conversation. For example, this time, Nitrite just gossiped and sent a message to Han family young master. How interesting. The equipment throwing is over. Why are there suddenly so many people wanting to buy Cloud City scrolls? Of course, this wasn't something interesting. Han family young master immediately understood what Nitrite was hinting at. He replied, Really? Coincidentally, I also have some friends who want to come over. Give me the exact same scroll. Thus, Han family young master found out the number of scrolls Yun Ting sold. There were 4 people in one scroll, so the number was easily determined. Then, Han family young master gave a suggestion to the seller. He thought that if all the scrolls had the same coordinates, it would easily cause traffic jams. The seller thought that this suggestion was quite good. Thus, he provided different coordinates and sincerely asked Han family young master for his opinion. Han family young master was very satisfied with the seller's service. Thus, he suggested that they sell a set of scrolls to try it out. Once again, the seller humbly accepted this suggestion. Thus, in the process of friendly negotiation between the seller and the buyer, the 7 teams that bought the teleportation scrolls from Yun Ting Studio to fly directly to Cloud City were doomed to tragedy. Among these 7 teams, the first team that conducted the trial operation led Gu Fei to their meeting place. The remaining 6 teams quickly got on the direct train back to their hometown. Chapter 887. The VIPs were on their way to receive reinforcements, but at the same time, they were thinking about how the news had been leaked. They didn't plan on making this operation too secretive, so they didn't emphasize any secrecy beforehand. It was possible that one of their subordinates had leaked the news. What they needed to figure out now was whether this incident was caused by gossip, or if someone had specifically leaked the news and sold them out. After all, Very Defying's welcome was too accurate and effective. It didn't seem like a random gossip. If someone had really sold them out, then it would be troublesome. The people they had brought with them were right beside them. They asked questions as they walked, gradually interrogating them. The first thing they did was state that there wasn't any responsibility for this matter. They just needed to figure out if it was intentional or not. The players understood and told the truth. In the end, there were quite a few people who had gossiped with their friends. If they continued to investigate, there would be even more people involved. Everyone felt a headache coming on. Then, Experienced Man suddenly thought of something. No, that's not right. What's wrong? The other VIPs asked. If it was a problem with our people, then why weren't we ambushed but the 6 of them? Even though we have a unified goal, we haven't formed a whole. If our people leaked the news, then it was our group that was exposed. It had nothing to do with the other 30 groups. So, if there's a problem, then it's the 6 groups that have a problem, Experienced Man said. According to what you said, even the 6 groups have nothing to do with each other, so there should be a problem with each of them, Experienced Man said. There's also Qianli drunk. How do you explain that? Arrow Seizing the World, who was the first to notice Qianli drunk, said. How did Qianli drunk appear there? Do you have any recollection of that? Experienced Man asked. Arrow Seizing the World tried hard to remember. I think he just casually walked over? It wasn't just casually. Experienced Man shook his head and looked at one of the 8 people. If I'm not wrong, Qianli drunk came with Encore's people. What do you mean? Encore's expression changed, showing signs of anger. I'm not questioning you. What I mean is, your team is the same as the 6 teams that were ambushed. Their whereabouts were exposed. That's why Qianli had his eyes on you when he was drunk. Then he found the place where we met. That's strange. Coincidentally, none of my brothers have mouths. How did the news leak out? Once again clearly wasn't in a good mood. As he spoke, he subtly mocked the fact that there were gossipers in the other teams. Perhaps this means that there's something wrong with your people. And because there's something wrong with them, they'll pretend that they didn't say anything in order to rid themselves of suspicion, right? Sword Adjudicator said. Bullshit. What did you say? Another burst of anger. Fuck, who are you cursing? None of these big shots were easy to deal with. Another round of filthy words enraged Sword Adjudicator, and he immediately glared at them. Quiet down, quiet down. First Low Temperature quickly stopped the 2 who were about to fight. We don't mean to suspect anyone. Then what do you mean? Once again Low Temperature was still angry. Think about it, we're from 31 different main cities, and each city can be said to have randomly selected about 20 people. Among these people, 7 of the city's people will spread the news, and it's very heaven-defying. Is this possible? How could an extraordinary force do something like that? First Low Temperature said. Then what's going on? Sword Adjudicator asked. We still have to find the problem from these 7 families. Although the 7 of you don't know each other and have nothing to do with each other, in this operation, the 7 of you must have made the same mistake, and the very heaven-defying person seized this mistake and caught the 7 of you, First Low Temperature said. That's right. Once again Low Temperature nodded. I'll have to trouble First Low Temperature. Talk to your 6 brothers and see if you've done anything similar. Damn it, I really can't think of any problems. Once again Low Temperature mumbled, but he still went to talk to the leaders of the 6 teams. The 6 brothers who had returned to their hometown were still angry at this time. They, who had been ambushed, suspected that the news had been leaked. They organized their people to get revenge and also dealt with this matter. From the degree of the ambush, The other side was well prepared and had a good estimate of their strength. This kind of spy could only be found among their own people. After all, the other 30 people, and even the employer behind the scenes, Ing Chi, couldn't possibly know where they would go or how many people there would be. Those who would do this were all their best friends. Now that they suddenly realized that there might be a problem with one of them, it was quite a painful thing. The 6 of them were also at a loss. Once again Low Temperature started to contact them one by one. He sent a message to the 6 of them, telling them the conclusion of their discussion. The 6 of them were all angry and didn't consider the problem very carefully. When they heard the analysis, they immediately felt that it was reasonable. Extraordinary Defying had no reason to have such a large force. Common points. How about this? We'll make a detailed list of everything we've done after receiving this mission. Then, we'll compare them and we should be able to find common points. Once again Low Temperature wasn't a brainless person, he had his own ideas. Okay, let's do that. One of them nodded. Although this matter was a bit troublesome, they knew that it was very important. If they didn't find this loophole, it was very likely that they would be used again and again by their opponents. While the big shots were discussing this problem, the extraordinary people weren't idle either. Han Family Young Master had already ordered the guild members to search for a group of 100 or more people in Cloud City. This group of people was really eye-catching. They didn't even need to search the streets themselves. Everyone received this order and immediately sent a message to all their friends, asking if they saw such a large group of people on the streets. In less than 5 seconds, the movements of the big shots were exposed countless times. Different people, at different places, noticed their group. In the end, they were reported one by one. Brother, you got these locations and marked them on the map. The routes of the big shots were almost connected. They're currently here. Brother, you tapped on the map. From the direction they're moving in, they aren't going to the revival point. Han Family Young Master said. Why are they going to the revival point? Brother, you asked. With their current numbers, they should know that they aren't our opponents, so they need to wait for new reinforcements. Going offline is obviously the safest method. Even if they didn't go offline, they shouldn't have gathered in such a large group. Isn't exposing themselves so obviously asking to be killed? So I'm sure that their reinforcements will be here soon. They're on the way to meet up. Then why don't they split up? Wouldn't they not be exposed that way? Brother, you said. They're probably afraid of being ambushed. Han Family Young Master laughed. Originally, they were in the dark and we were in the light, but now the tables have turned. Then what do we do next? Do you even need to ask? Once they block us, we'll just kill them. Yun Zhongmu knew that these people were definitely sent by Ing Chi, so he was especially spirited. Everyone's numbers are about the same. Even if we can surround them, we'll definitely suffer losses if we fight them head-on. Let's just have Qinli bring some people with speed to harass them. Han Family Young Master said. Let's just directly kill them. We'll wipe them all out in one go. Yun Zhongmu said. If we wipe them out this time, what about the next time? What about the next time? Han Family Young Master said, if one of us loses a level, we'll lose a portion of our strength. Even if Ing Chi wipes out this group, he can still find experts from all over the world. How many rounds can we last with your method of fighting? Motherfucker, is this bastard trying to play us to death? Yun Zhongmu cursed. His thinking is too simple. Han Family Young Master laughed. I'm going to go find Qinli. Sword Demon stood up. He had always been a guild leader who liked to lead by example. He was obviously a speed class, so this time, when most people could rest, Sword Demon was prepared to participate. I'm going too. Yutian Shenming took out his bow from his pocket and slung it over his shoulder. Carrying 3 bows like this was actually quite troublesome, but ever since this guy realized that this appearance was very eye-catching, he never got tired of it. He always walked like this on the streets, and as soon as there was no one around, he would immediately put them in his pocket. Of course I can't just sit around. Yun Zhongmu laughed. Go, whoever wants to go can go. Han Family Young Master didn't say anything else. These experts were worth worrying about. Tell us their location at any time. Sword Demon said and then left. At the same time, he sent a message in the guild, calling for people with speed. The people from the 10 Guild Alliance all responded that they wanted to participate. Yun Zhongmu immediately cursed, "Motherfucker, can't you read? We need speed. Do you know what speed is? Zhu Xianyu grandson, there's nothing you can't do. Get away from me." Sword Demon called for people on his end, and then contacted Gu Fei. Gu Fei was busy clearing his PK points, but the results weren't ideal. Firstly, there was a big battle in Cloud City, and too many people had dropped levels. Everyone was busy recovering their levels, so who would dare to PK? Secondly, they were intimidated by Gu Fei, the godly arrester. Especially after his wanted license was exposed, everyone was even more worried. Although they couldn't be soft when it was time to PK, everyone would still ask if 1000 Miles Drunk was online after PK. If he was online, they would turn themselves in. Every PK point would cost them an hour. Otherwise, if they were caught by 1000 Miles Drunk, they would have to pay double. At this time, Gu Fei was online, so the atmosphere in Cloud City was very good. The PK rate plummeted, and the suicide rate rose. Gu Fei went into the wanted mission office and scanned. The number of missions made him depressed. Fortunately, he could barely clear 29 PK points. As a result, when he looked for targets, 8 out of 10 of them were very overpowered. Of course, there were a lot of people with PK points from the ambush just now. Therefore, Gu Fei was really depressed. Sword Demon and the others had finished their meeting and were ready for the next step. Gu Fei's PK points had only been cleared by 9 points. This was the worst record he had ever seen since he got the wanted emblem and upgraded his wanted license. The players in Cloud City had already bowed to the devil and didn't dare to act rashly again. At this time, the dungeon problem had been solved, and the cross-city search function that was temporarily given to him had been taken back. Gu Fei couldn't clear his PK points in Cloud City, so he was preparing to take the teleport scroll to other main cities to try his luck. "Okay, hurry up." Sword Demon listened to the whole story and responded, "Sigh, morals are degenerating day by day. Why doesn't anyone PK anymore?" Gu Fei sighed and flew to Cloud City's neighbor, Moonlit City. In his impression, that was a paradise for PK and the most popular market for wanted missions. Moonlit City didn't disappoint Gu Fei. Although Yun Zhongmu and the others had left, the atmosphere was still the same. There were many missions and people in the wanted mission office. Gu Fei's name in Moonlit City was second only to that of Cloud City. When he entered the mission office, there were actually people who could recognize him. The players of Moonlit City who advocated PK were naturally very respectful to the PK King. They grandly opened up a path that led directly to the mission release window. Clear PK points, clear PK points. Gu Fei greeted everyone. He was a very polite person. When others treated him like this, he naturally had to be polite. "Boss Jianli, how many PK points do you have?" Someone asked. "It's already 9 p.m. There's only 20 points left." Gu Fei said. Everyone worshipped him to death. He was worthy of being called the king. The world leaderboard used to be 29, but now he was 20. As expected of someone who had always been at the top. Not only were there many missions, but his PK points were also very satisfactory to Gu Fei. He quickly went to the front row and greeted everyone. He patted his coat of arms and flew off. After teleporting, he checked his coordinates. He wasn't too far from his destination. Gu Fei looked in the right direction and quickly rushed over. After rushing and rushing, he finally felt depressed again. Today was really an unlucky day. Gu Fei thought this as he walked forward. When the people who came over saw Gu Fei, they were very surprised and quickly came over to greet him. "Why are you here?" The woman with the wanted mission number asked. "There's something." Gu Fei said. "What is it?" Women were naturally gossipy. "I say, aren't you here to travel? Don't cause trouble for the people of Moonlit City." Gu Fei said. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" 8 PK points. "How many people did you kill?" Gu Fei sighed. "Are you retarded? 8 PK points is obviously killing 8 people." The woman looked at Gu Fei with disdain. In the end, she was startled and angry. Fuck, you took a mission, right? You dare to come here and put me on the wanted list. Gu Fei didn't explain. He patted his coat of arms and was ready to fly to his next target. In the white light, he waved at the girls. It could be considered a greeting and a farewell. Fuck, he runs fast. Slender Waist Dance caught up in a few steps, but Gu Fei had already disappeared. Although she couldn't catch up to him, she could always catch up to the news. Slender Waist Dance chased after him and continued to gossip. Why did you come to Moonlit City? To PK, Gu Fei said. There's no PK in Cloud City? Slender Waist Dance asked. No, there's really no PK. When this was brought up, Gu Fei started to cry. He felt like he should move to Moonlit City. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to PK if he kept traveling. Who did you PK with this time? Slender Waist Dance asked. The girls from Amethyst left when 5 knights contacted the guilds in Cloud City. At that time, they were afraid that they would be tied down by Gu Fei. Although they weren't there, they still cared about the situation. They would ask about it from time to time, so they had a basic understanding of the situation. After that, they didn't even need to ask about it. There were all kinds of gossip on the forums. It's probably someone that Ing Chi sent. Gu Fei said. There's no end to it. I'm sick of hearing it. Slender Waist Dance said. If we're done, who should we PK with? Gu Fei said. That makes sense. Then I'll go with you. Slender Waist Dance suggested. With so many things going on, Amethyst had been hiding in Moonlit City. That was because she knew her own limits. She knew that they wouldn't be able to help much, and might even be a burden. However, Slender Waist Dance was an exception. She was also a very strong person. Sure. Gu Fei didn't mind. I'll come back after I clear my PK points. You can report to Sword Demon first. I'll do it too. Slender Waist Dance said. I've already taken the first few spots on the leaderboard. Don't steal them. Gu Fei said cautiously. Fuck, I've taken the first spot too. Slender Waist Dance yelled. The first spot she mentioned was actually second on Gu Fei's leaderboard because she was the first spot on Gu Fei's leaderboard. Io, that's too bad. Gu Fei said. Slender Waist Dance opened the quest tab. As expected, she failed. Fuck, why are you so fast? Slender Waist Dance said. I hope you didn't take the next one. Gu Fei said. Are you trying to show off? Slender Waist Dance said angrily. What? It's not like I have that stupid license. How can I take 2 at once? Slender Waist Dance said. So that's how it is. Gu Fei said. What do you mean that's how it is? I've taken the first few spots on the leaderboard. You can take the ones after. Gu Fei said. Slender Waist Dance was helpless. She knew that she wouldn't be able to compete with Gu Fei. People were meant for wanted quests. No matter how luxurious her equipment was, she didn't have that function. When Gu Fei cleared his 20 PK points, Slender Waist Dance was still 3 points short. She was so angry that she wanted to strangle Gu Fei. I'm going back first. I'll contact you later. Gu Fei said. Just you wait. Slender Waist Dance clenched her teeth. Gu Fei teleported to the Wanted Quests office in Moonlit Night City and flew back to Cloud City. Sword Demon and the others had already gathered more than 10 people. There were archers and assassins. They were just waiting for Gu Fei to arrive and prepare to attack those guys. Where? Gu Fei immediately asked Sword Demon as soon as he landed. Sword Demon reported the coordinates and Gu Fei ran. On the VIP's side, after comparing and studying the list of the 6 comrades who sacrificed themselves, they finally found out. They bought scrolls from Cloud Ting Studio. They went through many ways to find scrolls, but in the end, they all bought scrolls from Cloud Ting Studio. This was a detail that they were very consistent in their actions. So that's how it is. After informing everyone of this result, everyone immediately came to a realization. This problem was originally feared that you wouldn't think of it. As long as you thought of it, everything else would be easily solved. Fortunately, we discovered it in time, the weather-beaten man said thoughtfully. You're tuning in to the Passion Page's YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.